Cool. Hello.
And we're live? Yes, we are live. Thank you. Forgot to flip.
Yes.
It's always the switch.
Mm-hmm.
We are. I am loud, so I will turn myself down.
Okay, you are loud, you say?
I am loud. It's okay.
Okay.
What about the others?
Yeah, you're okay. I'll turn my
You're
headphones
good.
up. That'll fix that problem. There we go. Right then.
Hey,
good
everybody.
morning. Good morning. Good morning. And good morning.
Mhm. And good evening. Because
Yeah, I was just gonna say that was your prompt, folks. You're the Aussies. You're supposed
Sorry,
to look at me and
yes.
say good evening.
Look, it's late.
Time is a social construct.
In this AMA, I will.
let's set out a thesis here. No.
Yeah.
No, let's not.
Let's not set it a thesis. We don't have time for me to go on that long. So yeah.
Also, no.
So for those of you who haven't noticed, that guy's not here. Hence the black box. I think I can do clever button pushy things. And where is Drew Clicky? There we go. So yeah, either way, that guy's still not there. So yeah, Drew's out today, and so we've decided that we're gonna stream anyway, and hang out with y'all. I'm gonna let them, and her, ask questions and talk about the game and just that sort of thing. And if folks pop in and they want to join in, they can do that. So the whole idea is talking about gaming. So not quite a talk show, not quite a game show. No, we don't want this to be a game show. We want it to be a show about games, but that's not the same thing. Yeah.
There are points?
No, I miss. I really miss slime. Slime was a big feature of my childhood, and I feel like we lost slime when really we should have sort of leaned more into it.
Are we talking like Nickelodeon slime?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Like we dropped the ball on slime real hard, and we should have pushed into it much more.
There could definitely be more slime.
So you say you folks want to get slimed in the next adventure. Got it.
No. That's
we should lean
not what I
hard into
said.
that. Yes, okay, got it. I'll make
Look,
notes.
it's not the actual
no.
person. It's not.
Alexandre would hate that.
If we can, if we can work out a way that we're sliming the player, not
Yeah. I feel like I
If
would
you-
be happy.
Audience at home, donate to
What-
our stream.
once-
One of the players will get slime.
yeah, it's just like
Bring
well, now
your
I kind of
friends
want
to
once we
follow
like
first.
conventions are back on, it's like could do some kind of like
Slime show.
yeah, but that sort of like Nickelodeon style slime show plus role playing plus I don't know
Oh my
how, but I want
goodness.
to do it now.
I think you're really overthinking this. Is my reaction here.
I want to drop
No.
slime on people and play
I-
play role playing games at the same time.
I want to. I've
Really, that's
decided. We need a whole adventure designed around what happens to adventurers that get sucked into cubes.
Oh, that's easy. They wind up skeletons. You can see them kind of.
Well, yes, but like, what happens before then? Like the adventure there. That
Oh,
is
an
what you
awful
would
lot of
role play in
screaming,
the
except-
slime.
Yeah, an awful lot of screaming, except that because you're in the slime, knowing it just jiggles a lot.
If you start
Homicide
out,
Jello,
this is
really.
this is assuming a D&D system. If you start out level 20 and you get consumed by a slime, you could probably survive because you're just taking small amounts of damage every time. So what happens in that
Got acid
period of
resistance or
time?
something.
You've got acid resistance. You like level 20, you've got all of the hit points, and then you just kind of sit there like
Something
dealing
asphyxiation.
with that.
Yeah, the bear totem druid just sits there fuming,
Yeah. Yeah.
having to like attack to stay in rage, just punches and just he could stay there for a while.
Yeah.
Didn't
And
someone
that's
work
how you
out
get
like
the
a
slime in.
high level bear totem barbarian like while raging can survive a fall from terminal velocity
Yes.
or something like that?
Yeah.
gets a little silly at high level. I mean, high levels get a little silly in most role playing games. So
Well, the whole point of when you get up into the when you hit 20-ish, you're functionally able to punch gods in the nose and have them apologize for it. So
Yeah.
I mean, we're sorry that you punched me. You know, I mean.
So, is this where we're going with the song? That's my first question.
That's-
Am I going to
that's-
be punching the song in the nose?
that's the thing. You get to the point, and the song's like, "Cool, your turn." And Elena went, "No, no, Alexandre."
Alexandre becomes the song.
Yeah, phenomenal cosmic power. Itty bitty living space.
Yes. One of my favorite B movies is a story about a guy who basically wakes up one morning and he can hear someone playing a flute. And it's a really bad B movie chop suey about this guy following the path to enlightenment. And at he goes through a whole bunch of interesting trials, including where he gets into a fight with a capoeirista and gets his ass handed to him. Because the whole point was not to get into the fight, and yet because he's this bold, brash adventurer type, he falls for the bait, right? So there's all of these things where he has to learn to be a much more moderate sort of so he finally gets to the point where he reaches the Book of Truth, and there's a guardian there, and he has to defeat the guardian, and then so he does that fairly handily because he's learned all the lessons. And the trick is, at this point, the rule is you can either look at the Book of Truth and confront the reality of the world, or you're stuck being its next guardian.
No.
And most people, and so by definition, there's a long list of people who've gotten to this moment and realize they can't handle the truth, right?
Oh.
Which is the reason there's currently a guardian. So the hero, being the hero, of course, flips the book open, and every page just has a different shaped mirror on it.
Yep.
And so it was just, and of course, yeah, I thought it was just, like I say, as B movies go, that one was more thought provoking than most.
Yeah.
I can't remember the title of it, but it's a really interesting set of looks about causality and how we perceive blame. Right? So there's one point where, as a result of the actions of the main character, someone he cares for dies. But the reason is he was strictly told that because of the way the culture works, if you do these things, this person is going to have to be executed because that's just the way our culture works. And of course, just because he's the hero, he figures the rules don't apply to him. You know, so he does those things, and he wakes up the next morning. The entire encampment is gone, and the person is literally crucified when he wakes up. And he gets wild about it. He vows revenge, blah, 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 blah. But then over time, he comes to realize, no, that's not your fault for doing what you said. It's my fault for having done what I did. Right?
Yeah.
It was just, there's interesting discussions about law, about good and evil, just a whole bunch of really odd little idiosyncratic looks at what we consider normal, right? The law says this must happen. If you break the law, then that's going to happen. Yeah, but is the law just? It doesn't matter. Not in the world
Doesn't
he's
matter.
in, right? So, yeah.
I'm always interested in people following laws, whether or not they are just.
Yeah. That is my favorite criteria, actually, for anything akin to D&D alignments. My favorite question is, it's 2:00 in the morning, you're on a drive from hither to yon, you come to a four-way stop, and you're the only car, and then anywhere that you can see, do you stop?
Me personally.
Yeah.
Come to a four-way crossing, I'm the only one there.
Yeah, it's 2:00 in the
Do I
morning.
stop?
There's not another car, and there's not another car for miles. Do you stop the four-way stop, or do you just roll on through?
I stop.
I would slow.
Okay.
I would slow enough that it could be perceived as a stop, but I wouldn't stop entirely because if I perceive nothing there,
Mm-hmm.
then the likelihood is there's nothing there. So I would
Right.
slow but not stop.
What about you, Muffin? What about you, Jamie? I was going to call you Muffin.
Hey, Muffin.
Hey, Muffin.
Both are appropriate.
Uh-huh.
I would slow approaching an intersection regardless, but like I wouldn't slow a lot,
Yeah.
to be honest. Like,
Yeah. So interestingly enough, this is a very simple question that dives heavily into alignment.
Yeah,
A
I agree.
fully lawful individual must stop because the law says if you do not stop, you will be fined. The fact that it would be actually impossible for the law to be enforced under these situations is how you determine alignment. You know, it's the old joke. It's not what you do in public that says who you are. It's what you do in private, right?
Mm.
And
Yeah.
so the easiest definition of law versus chaos, interestingly enough, is that question: do you stop in spite of the law being unenforceable? If the answer is yes, then you are an inherently lawful person. If the answer is no, you're an inherently chaotic person. Not to the extreme of, let's say, someone like Heath Ledger's
like,
Joker.
yeah, but where does neutrality sit on that? Like, it's like,
Well, see, I
I don't think it's inherently chaotic to break the law. It is,
I-
but it is not lawful.
Yes, exactly. And see, this is, and then you get into these, and then you get into the question: how do you determine neutrality? Well, it's easy. Why didn't you stop? Because the law is fucking pointless. That's someone who's chaotic. Because
Yeah, that's
it
me.
doesn't matter under
Well-
these circumstances. That's neutrality,
Yeah.
Oh, so I'm neutral.
right?
To me, it's a like whenever I'm considering any law, not just
Mhm.
like road rules, any law at all, I will break that law if the law doesn't serve the purpose it was designed to serve.
Yes, and so and this is essentially when you talk about someone who's chaotic good, that is someone who values justice over law. The outcome must be good. So if the law was designed, my favorite example, as someone who's done a lot of historical research into swordplay, Brandenburg in the 1600s had a sumptuary law that said if you entered Brandenburg with a rapier or a string of pearls greater than 6 feet in length, they would be cut to that length. Now, there's two implicit comments here. This is a sumptuary law. Literally, if you had the money to have more than a 6-foot string of pearls, it didn't bloody matter if they snipped them and gave you the other half. Because you would just go to a jeweler and get it fixed once you're in the city.
Yes.
On the other hand, if you could afford to if you had a rapier that was 6 feet long, you were only there to murder people. Because that is an awkward, unwieldy weapon to carry in public. Okay, I'm 6 feet tall, right?
Yeah,
So you're
yeah. I
talking
was
about a
gonna say,
blade that
rapier
climbs.
6 feet tall is like a
If it's
serious
specifically
war.
a rapier as well, it's like that's just getting silly.
Yeah.
That's a Chantel and a half. There's no way.
Yes, exactly. It's a Chantel and a half. What the hell?
Why would I do that?
There's reach weapons, and then there's that ridiculousness. And as someone who's actually, even you get up to, I've worked with a 60-inch blade, like that's a full 5 feet, and you spend as much time with a hand on the ricasso as you do actually one-handing the weapon, because there's just so much momentum that it's practically impossible to keep the point on target.
Yeah.
So it really is a weapon that's only got one person. It's to murder someone as far away from you as possible. It is not a weapon to look good as an affectation of fashion, which is what the small sword of the day was supposed to be, right? And so you look at these laws, one of them does not serve the purpose it is written to be. A sumptuary law is about keeping poor people looking poor and rich people looking rich. Literally, right? Whereas the rapier law is about, no, you're not allowed to walk in here with a bazooka as a method of going shopping. You sure you don't want to lower that price, Mr. Merchant? Yeah, you know.
Which is true, yeah.
Yeah. It's one of those amusing anecdotes I tripped over, like I say, when I was doing historical research. So one of the things I find interesting about the Lanogiianes campaign is because there was this player request to throw out the D&D conventions about alignment. I'm a jerk, so immediately I started trying to figure out how to have a conversation about good and evil in the game without alignment as a framework.
I think for us particularly as well, it was also the idea, like where you get the thing in D&D where it's like
genetic
default alignment. Yeah, default alignments for like all goblins are blah, all orcs are blah, and you're just like, no, stop.
Yeah, that's the true issue. It's not alignment; it's genetic alignment.
And then I mean, particularly in D&D, like I particularly appreciate in terms of like personal alignment. It's not as big a deal as it has been in previous editions.
That was something
because there isn't anything that actually like mechanically triggers off it anymore.
And to
it's
me,
just a role-playing tool.
Yeah, and to me that was actually the sort of the jumping off point was that when I went back and I looked, as a GM, because I've been playing D&D for a very long time, and one of the classic example spells was always going to be protection from good, protection from evil. You know, I literally hassled the hell out of an evil character that was in one of my campaigns. But they were rummaging around this old, and of course they hadn't told officially the group didn't know the character's alignment. They were chaotic evil, so they're quite capable of playing along as a good guy if it suited them. And they were actually he was lawful evil, sorry, so he was quite capable of playing along as a good guy as it suited him. Until they actually were rummaging through this old monastery, and they came to a pile of supplies and treasures that had been magically sealed there, and he kept bouncing off an invisible barrier. And he was the only person in the group who was affected by the barrier. No one could figure out what the barrier was, but of course it was protection from evil, because it was a good aligned temple. And so the rest of the party could walk over and pick stuff up and rummage through the treasure, but he kept bouncing off his barrier. And it was just amusing in that respect. But that spell, someone pointed out to me, that spell no longer exists in 5e. At which point, I have to ask, why even have it on the sheet anymore?
What was that? Because it's no longer a mechanical thing.
Bizarrely enough, there are still like a couple of magic items in the book. There's like 4 or 5 total.
Yeah, there might be.
Which require, like, the paladin weapon requires you be a lawful good paladin or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
which,
that it does.
Let's
But at the same time, like, I am not necessarily averse to items that relate to a class or a personal standpoint. I'm against racial.
Yep.
I'm against it in racial senses. So, like, you can, if you take a vow that you are not going to harm someone and you break that vow, it's going to affect how things react to you, and I'm okay with that. Conceptually. Because I react to people differently if they do things that I find to be morally problematic.
I do,
and that's my standpoint as well. Like, that's going to be from my perspective, not from the global perspective.
For like an individual, on the individual level, the alignment really only shows you how you've been up to that point.
Yes.
It's like, up to that point, you have done enough stuff. You did evil things within the framework of society. You have become lawful evil.
Yeah.
But that isn't until that very second. But going into the future, if you go, actually, no, I'm turning a new leaf. I'm gonna start. And there's not a lot of mechanical, but like the GM is like, well, you've become more neutral. You're not really evil anymore. Then eventually you might become good. And then, but also at the same time, like, if an item is like, if you have the whatever, I forget what the paladin sword is. But if it's like, if the sword magically is like, how have you lived up until this point? Not good enough. No.
Yeah.
But then if you've turned over and you've worked hard and you get to that point and you come back to that sword, and the sword's like, how have you lived up to this point? Good enough? Excellent. Here you go. Here are our abilities. That's whatever. But yeah, racial stuff is just silly and lazy.
Yep. Like, I understand where it comes from. It's a common problem.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I'm going to ignore the entire argument about just briefly at least that Tolkien, amongst others, was embracing the entire inherent warrior race theory and blah blah blah. But more that from a mechanical perspective, in a role-playing game whose core loop mechanic is bash monsters, take loot, level up, you have to have a convenient reason why bash monsters is okay.
Yes.
And one of those things, particularly in a lot of fiction throughout Europe, and even in other cultures, as an inherent sense of good and evil. Even if you define good and evil as friendly to a community versus destructive to a community. So almost every culture has the concept of demons, creatures, for example, things that are just automatically going to be deadly to you or are bad for the community. They're evil. So
yes.
And likewise, there's almost every culture has this concept of being fallen, corrupted in some way. You've done something so miserable, you are unredeemable. That's it. You're no longer, you are sub-community. right? And so for a core gameplay loop, it's convenient to have a neatly boxed list of things that fit into this category that you can that you can feel okay about whacking with a stick, right?
Yes.
See, I think that where that breaks down is particularly monsters who can build society and like have sentience and
Yes, I agree with you
Like-
completely.
Yes.
like having a. I mean, dragons become like an interesting question because they are sentient, but they have like no society, so that's like its own
They
different
do.
thing.
It's just one of individuality. It's isolation and individuality to the point of don't want to interact with other people. That's still a society. It's just not one that
True.
follows
Yeah.
our.
Yeah. I
Also on a
actually don't mind.
Vastly different time scale.
Yeah, I also don't mind things which are inherently massively magical creatures having the magic have an opinion, for lack of a better way of putting it. So that, inherently some types of dragons are just nastier than others because of the types of magic they embrace. I'm a really nice guy, but I'm here to burn your village. Because that's how I get your cows.
To me, that's a question of. It becomes a question to me of why. It's not it's not the action, it's why you're doing the action.
Intention versus.
Yeah, so like a dragon turning up at a village to burn the village down could be because that dragon doesn't have food, could be because someone from that village came and took something that belonged to the dragon, could be because the dragon's having a really bad day.
Dragon's bored.
I'm not saying the dragon's bored, and those things aren't good, but I'm also not by those standards, I'm not a good person, because if I'm having a bad mood, I'm going to kill a bug, not take it outside. That's kind of how I see it.
Yep. But it does.
I kind of really, sorry, I was with the image of this dragon looking at this like freshly formed colony and just being like, all right, and just turns around, gets this giant like Tupperware container, just plops it on top of this thing, slides like a sheet under the foundations of all the buildings, lifts it up, takes it to a different country, puts it down, and then just goes back to its home. And the town people are just like,
what? So campaign 2 then.
Why are we in the elf realm now? I don't.
Oh, that is such a gorgeous visual. Yeah, ancient gold dragon looks at its window after having a nap. Oh God, them again.
It's really very, very delicately being like, okay, we don't want to alarm them. We just
have to be somewhere
like
else.
does it at night so the people don't even wake up. They just wake up and then somewhere else. And it's like they didn't even notice. It was so gentle.
I love it.
That is a beautiful image. So yeah, the whole thing about alignment gets complicated because I think one of the things that it does is it also removes agency, and a lot of players, particularly now, respond really strongly to that idea.
Yes.
As someone who's been, like I said, I started gaming in the 80s, and for us, agency wasn't really a conceptualization we had a huge amount of in gaming. We were very, for lack of a better way of putting it, we were so happy to be gaming, at the forefront of gaming, and we were so used to games, for a lot of us up to that point, games were games like Monopoly. Sorry, agency was literally the throw of the dice. And so it never really occurred to us that, quote, railroad adventures, because technically Pirates of the Caribbean is a fancy kind of railroad. It's literally the ride at Disney World of the same name, because the guy who wrote the script adored but when I've been on that ride, and it looks like your boat is going somewhere, but if you kind of look over the side where the light glare hits it just right, you realize you're actually over a rail, and there's a little subterranean tow that's pulling you along, and you've got this hunk of wire just underneath the water line, so your boat's sloshing all over the place, but you're always going the same direction no matter how chaotic it feels.
Yes.
I did like someone talked about it's like railroading is seen as this bad thing. Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Roller coasters are on a railroad.
Yeah.
Roller coasters are fun, but you chose to get onto that roller coaster.
Yes.
You made the call, and then because you were like, I'm going to enjoy this, but at the same time,
Yeah,
Yeah.
your level of agency at the top of the roller coaster as it goes tuck 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 wee, is a little thin. There's not a lot of agency at that point.
And definitely that's what, like when I said before, it was like alignment is kind of how you are up to that point, because
Yeah.
there's that older school viewpoint of like you can't do that because you are
Right.
chaotic good or whatever. That's not what a chaotic good person does, and you are a chaotic good person. It's like, no, I have been up until now a chaotic good person. That doesn't stop me from doing whatever the hell I want.
Yeah.
That might change, and but it's not really a system for that.
Yeah.
In the game.
One of my favorite implementations for tracking that is actually the Star Wars Old Republic MMO. Essentially, so it's all about light side, dark side. It's a Star Wars game, and the way it works is every narrative action you take, it plays very much almost like a single player game, including dialogue boxes where you get choices about what you want to do with the how does your character react, and usually there's a dark side choice, a neutral choice, and a light side choice, and you accumulate points of dark side and light side. What's interesting is that you do not deduct. It is not a sliding scale where because I've done a light side thing today and a dark side thing tomorrow, I'm at 0. No, your dark count goes up and your light count goes up, and who you are is how big the gap between these two things is.
Mm.
And that's because you do encounter these situations where, particularly if you're playing one of the non-force user, you're still getting assessed dark side, light side, but some of the force user NPCs will react to you. You'll encounter someone who themselves is a dark sider, but because you've just been nasty enough, they think you're okay. And then you can go have a conversation with a Jedi who looks at you askance, but can also see that you've done a lot of good things, so he'll give you the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
I think is it the Pathfinder? It's Kingmaker. The Pathfinder, like, did the computer version.
Yeah.
They're like, when you look at your alignment, it will like, it's like dots on a graph almost, or a pie chart almost, and you kind of like, you're the average of those dots.
Nice.
You chose where you start, but each time you do something, it will like pull you a little way.
Mm-hmm.
So every time you do a lawful thing, if you're chaotic, it pulls you towards lawful, but you have to actually leave the segment.
Yeah.
For it to actually have a mechanical effect, which I think, because Pathfinder is sort of 3 point, three is.
It's a derivative.
So I think there's still a mechanic. There are mechanical things for.
Pathfinder is an extension of the 3.5 rules, mostly because there were a whole bunch of people who absolutely hated the D&D 4 rules, and so decided to continue on with 3.5 and just fix it, which is Pathfinder.
I was always just like, it's just these days it's just a little too crunchy. It's just like I just don't need that many rules.
There's so many rules.
I ran the play test for second edition with a bunch of friends, and it's does a lot of really interesting things, but it's still on the side of I don't need this many rules. I know it's fascinating because as most of you know, I do a lot of chatting on Twitter, and particularly in the TTRPG community, and there's a lot of people I know who look at systems like Open Legend, for example, and they say, it's just not crunchy enough. Just, there are some people, and it's the vanilla versus chocolate discussion all over again. There's no right answer, but everyone's convinced there is.
Like my thing about this, and I mean, this is very much personal opinion, but like video games exist and I can play them for crunch. You know what I mean? Like
because crunch
you cannot make a video game that isn't built on crunch, because like that's
the point of the video game. Like the whole point is you're
organizing ones and zeros. It's numbers. It's all maths.
Yeah.
You know, you get some beautiful narrative games, but ultimately things like alignment in video games, the computer can't conceptualize like you being able to change your opinion it can only conceptualize ones and zeros, and so you are like, there has to be a system behind it somewhere. And so it when people get to know a game well enough, it's all crunchy as hell. And so that's where I get my crunch fixes. Like I've been playing a game called Genshin Impact over the last 2 months.
My son adores that. Yes.
It's a gorgeous game.
Yeah.
It's sort of for those who don't know, it's like a Breath of the Wild inspired adventure game in an anime style, but it's also a gacha game. So like if you have problems with gambling, don't play this game.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's an F2P, so it has F2P stuff in it.
Yeah, it has the Chinese style of F2P, which is that you can actually you pay money to roll randomly on tables to maybe get the characters that you want or whatever. But you can absolutely play the game free to play. It's like one of the few gacha games I've played where you can 100% clear all the content currently in the game without having to spend $1.
I've recently started playing Monster Hunter.
Yeah,
which hasn't been a game series I've really gotten into previously, and for whatever reason, last couple of weeks I was like, man, I really want to play this game.
Mm-hmm.
But while I was I'm going about actually getting the game, I was like, is there like a role-playing game that'll scratch this itch? Is there a board game that'll scratch this itch? And just trying to think about having now started playing it, I'm like, doing this as a role-playing game, you're going to need to pare it back a lot because there's a bunch of stuff. At one point I was looking something up and it showed me like how it calculated certain things. And I just went, I don't care. That's so much bizarre maths that it's like, it was I started with like, here's the damage rating. We divide that by 10. Why? Why do you take the damage rating of the weapon and divide it by 10 to begin with? Why don't you just show me? I was like, no, I don't need to know this.
Yeah, the maths in Monster Hunter is crunchy.
Because players love big numbers, that's why.
And I kind of, that's the only thing I could think of was like, is it literally just so you can show a bigger number to begin with? Because I kind of love that, but is it?
Yeah. Big numbers make the dopamine go brr.
Joke aside, I remember I did a lot of playing of World of Warcraft for a while. And when the first expansion pack came out, which was Burning Crusade, there was I think it's Burning Crusade.
No, hang on. There was wasn't the
Sounds correct?
No, wasn't the Ice Crown one with Arthas?
That's the second one. Anyway, so the point was that it's when the first time they rearranged everything. I was playing a warlock character at the time, and there was heated debate in the theory crafting about whether or not it was possible to actually launch a 1,000 point Shadowbolt. And there were people who were sure mathematically it was possible, and there were people who were sure mathematically it was impossible. But it was just this ridiculous back and forth about the significance of crossing the 1,000 point damage line. And in current X packs, they've literally had to scale damage back down because the numbers start getting so they're into 1,000,000 point hits and things like that, and it just becomes literally meaningless numbers at that point. So big numbers are cool. Way too big numbers are meaningless. So it's fascinating to see every once in a while to be a look under the hood and see things like, we just artificially inflate this number to make you feel good.
Well, it was literally for me, I was like, okay, what is this number telling me? Because it doesn't seem to be. What was I looking up? I had a weapon that did poison, but I was hitting people and going, I'm not seeing what this does.
They not die so quick.
It's like, I'm doing poison damage. Shouldn't that be a thing? And I looked it up and I was like, no, it's not poison damage. It's like how you give them the poisoned status ailment.
Okay. So it was
basically,
effect.
But it was like the way that it worked is the creature, depending on its resistance to the status effect, will have a threshold of say 120. And so you have to do enough poison to hit that threshold, at which point the creature is poisoned and the poison will do damage. But the dude's like, how do we work it to hit threshold? It was like, take the poison number, divide it by 10, times it by this, do it this one. And I just went, cool, hit more, hit threshold, it'll trigger. I'm good. It's all I need. Go away. But at that point, it's like, trying to do that, but trying to do any of that in a pen and paper.
Oh,
exactly. Well, that's it. Right?
Yeah.
Like I don't want to have to calculate 4 different damage stats to work out what my actual damage output is in paper, because I have to do that math every single time. The reason I can do it in Genshin and why I like having to stack 4 different stats that multiply is because the computer does that maths every time I swing the sword, and all I have to do is click the left mouse.
I had a guy. There was a guy I used to know. I used to do role playing with, but he was toying with like making his own role playing system, and he showed me at one point, and I was just like, man, there's so much like to do a thing. It's like you had to do. There's like 4 steps, but that's like every time I'm doing a thing, and I'm rolling through. It's like I'm rolling, but I'm adding this, taking this, dividing it by this, and I'm just like, that's so much. It's like it doesn't take that long, but it's every time. And he was just like looking at me going, I don't understand. It's really easy. And it took me a while to realize all of the math that the game required, he did very quickly in his head.
Yep. Yeah,
and he was very good at it. He could just be like, all right, and I just need to, it's like I'm rolling a bunch of D10s. That gives me this percentage, which like he rolled some Ds, gives me the percentage. I deduct this number, add this number, and I do this, and I add these other modifiers, and this is the result. And it was just like, he could do it pretty much while he was rolling. And I was like, no, here's what everyone else is doing. I'm going to roll a number. I add this, then I subtract this, and then I do this.
Yeah.
And that's like 3 times as long as what it, and he was just like, oh.
Yeah.
And then add dyscalculia to that. And
then anyone sitting there for 10 minutes. and that's like, I'm fairly decent with like, just like modeling my way through. Like I had a job once where I was like editing maths books, not like usually only like primary school stuff, but it was still just like I was supposed to be there to check like grammar, and I was going back to the writers being like, the maths is wrong, right?
Whoops.
So
I joked because I was only supposed to be there to upload PDFs to their website, and then at one point I was like, I could just check this for you, and then I came back going, the maths is wrong, and then I had a job for a few months. where I think I was technically an assistant editor, but I just joked my job description was to make the other editors cry. Because I'd be like, I know every at least once a week I'd have a conversation which would go, hey, I know I'm supposed to be checking blah, but I noticed this. Is this a problem? And then the head editor would look at me and go, yeah, but I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. It's like you're editing a PDF of a book that's been in print for 3 years.
Oh.
And I was just like, oh, sorry. It's like you're editing what we're putting on the website. This book's been in print for 3 years. I was just like, oh, well, it's wrong. I was like, bye.
Sorry. Yeah. And look, this is the thing. This all goes to say we don't want to be doing that amount of but at least us 4 here don't want to be doing that amount of maths at the table. We want to be telling stories.
They want that for whatever reason.
That is not why everyone plays role-playing games. Some people do it to make the big numbers go. But I had a player like that in my first campaign. She's a person I adore as a friend. And I will never play role-playing games with her again because all she wanted was the next best magic item and to make her next dice roll be bigger than the last one. And that's cool. It's just not how I want to play.
One of the games I play in every week is at a West Marches style Star Wars game. And the meta of it is it takes place in the events in the 20 years after the Battle of Endor. And so it's a Jedi campaign. Everyone basically starts out barely knowing anything about the Force, and have just recently showed up at the temple on Yavin 4, where Skywalker has established the new Jedi Order. And so all of the players it's a curated player list. You have to go through an interview and such. But we had a couple players just because of the circumstances got grandfathered in from another group. And so we have encountered a couple of the players who their only roleplay experience is MMOs. So they're very good at text RP, but they also have this idea that what matters most is gear. And so it's produced some interesting conversations amongst the GMs, of which I'm one, about, we don't want to, we would rather help them become good role players, but at the same token, we also don't want to take away their fun completely, even though their fun really isn't what we're about. So there's been some interesting conversation there about how do you meet a middle ground on that, right? Yes. Where because Star Wars, the Fantasy Flight Games system, is very sensitive to gear. There are some circumstances that you can really warp the hell out of the probability numbers with good equipment. And so if you're gear focused, the way a lot of MMO players are, and I mean, I've played my Warcraft main literally has got if you slash played on the main for that character, there literally over 360 days worth of playtime on that character. So I mean, guilty as I put a huge amount of time into that game because there was a period of my life that things just weren't good, and that was my escapism. But for those players, you sort of come in with this idea of role play roughly looks like how I answer NPCs in very short sentences, and by overcoming cool problems to get better gear so that I can get onto bigger challenges. And so we've had a couple of players literally defining their characters around the idea of what's your character's objective. What is your what is your character's desire? And it's to get this obscure relic so that they can bump up to the next power level, so they can take on the enemies of the Jedi Order. Okay, we probably need to have a conversation. That's literally not what this game's about.
Yeah.
You can end up situations where it is like, and you do want it to just be this conversation where it's like, particularly if someone's like, if they come through and their only real experience is MMOs, and then it's like, it might just be like, they haven't considered that there's a different way.
Yeah, exactly.
And they'd be like, oh, okay, no, that shift. But if it is literally, and which, to be fair, like entirely legitimate way of wanting to play your game, not wanting to yuck anyone's yum, but it is just like, that's the cool thing you want to do, but that's not what we're doing. It might just be the conversation of like, you'll need another group.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like we can hang out socially, it's fine. But if you want to come here, we're not doing the thing you want to do.
Yeah, you're not going to.
And that just might be the reality.
Yeah.
So.
Very recently. So one of the games I run is Savage Worlds, using the interface Zero rules for a cyberpunk game. It's my Alpine City 2056 setting. And a very good friend of mine dropped in, played about a half dozen sessions, and said, your take on cyberpunk just isn't my take on cyberpunk. This is just really different. I said, yeah, that's cool. He said, so I'm gonna duck because this just isn't what I'm looking for. Yeah, sure, of course. And it was really interesting because I had a couple of people in the game like, is he mad at us or something? Like, did we fuck up? Like, no, it wasn't what he was looking for in a game. So he, why play something that's not doing what you want? And it was just a very interesting conversation. How a couple of much younger players in the group were like really stressed out that they had pissed somebody off as the only reason that anyone would leave a game. Right.
Yeah. I mean, it could get awkward when it's like a group of mates and you're like, you might not enjoy this, but at the same time it's like, but they do enjoy just hanging out with mates.
Yeah, exactly.
But then like, I don't know, it's definitely can be a tricky conversation depending on what the social dynamic is. But if someone just like comes into your group, goes, actually no, but thank you for the time, that's fine. It's whatever.
So do you lot have any questions for me about Lanogiianes or about me as a GM? I mean, we've sort of done
our game.
Yeah. Change the topic real quick here and yak about our stuff for a little bit.
Is Equidian the bad guy? No, don't answer.
I'm just going to and this.
Don't.
Right back to
They're going back.
Of bad.
See earlier discussion on bad.
Though somewhat related, I want to know more about the theology of Lanogiianes.
Yeah, sure.
I've read through everything on the World Anvil. I know that there are like existent prime divinities, ascended saints, and things of opposition, and I know somewhat about like the origin story behind these things, but
so
it's not something we address in game very much because we're also like tied to some sort of possible new deity style thing with the song, and like I don't want to step on spoiler territory with that stuff, but I'm sorry. Or or this is the thing, like it's either older or both or whatever. It doesn't. It's not really.
Yeah, but it is an interesting discussion because one of those conceits that modern Western fantasy drags in along with it is that good and evil are aspects of divinity.
Mm.
That's.
I mean, one of the things with like for me, I guess, with the in terms we were talking about like default or like just like this race has this alignment all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like often for me, like extra planar beings are like an exception.
Yeah.
Where it's like all can't remember which way would demons and devils go, but like all the devils are the lawful evil one.
Devils are lawful evil.
Devils
It's like all devils are lawful evil. It's like, yeah, because they are literal manifestations of that mindset.
Yeah.
All demons are chaotic evil because they are literal manifestations of that mindset. It's like they aren't.
It's
they aren't
elemental
like mortal.
evil, if you
will. They've taken that concept. There's been enough of that concept to actually form beings, and their very essence is suffused with that. So it's like, yeah, all of them can be that thing because that's what the role is. Like, you know, they're similar ones where, you know, there'll be lawful good ones, there'll be whatever, and I think that I can be down with.
So is there that same sort of like theological thing in Lanogiianes? Because I know like we haven't really come across tieflings, but we know they exist.
Yeah, so the short version is that actually there is no short version. So
I see.
Short
the short version is that there isn't one.
Is shrugging and running away.
So each, like I say, there's as we've commented before, there's a fairly well-rounded pantheon of prime divinities, which are sort of the old gods, if you will, and then the ascended saints, who are all the good guys and girls from the war that felled the Giant Kin Empire, basically martyrdom, if you will, functional martyrdom. And the other thing that, you know, theologians, anyone, you know, who actually bothers having points in religion as a skill, will know is that they're actually fiends. Different states prioritize who they worship based on the value set of the state. So, but if you're in any given country, you'll find any given race, and any given member of that race may worship any given deity entirely based on who they are and what they do. Like, I'll give you the classic example. So, Bahida is the Lord of Thieves. He's a saint. So, you know, most rogues, no matter where most rogues, scoundrels, masterminds, wherever they are, at least know who she is, because there's a question about that. Incredibly good disguise skill, it turns out. No one's really sure what the answer is. So
if audience members who are watching this, whether it's now or on the VOD, go back through all the VODs of Unlawful Disorder. I don't know which ones we have currently up on the channel, but
all of the
Open Legend ones are up, I think.
All of the Open Legend ones?
Everything Open Legend is up.
Yeah, the D&D stuff needs to be processed.
I believe that there is a reference to Bahida within that part of the campaign. I think it was during it where
on the flipper.
This guy behind me, Spider.
Yeah. You know, on the flipper, Vakusalai is the Lady of War. I can see it being completely appropriate at some point in time for both Jasper and Lucas to be, you know, uttering a prayer under their breaths to the Lady of War. So one of the big departures from the way that that Western society looks at things, quite honestly, is that this is polytheistic society.
Polytheistic,
yeah. Multiple deities. You may have a patron saint or a patron deity, but you will worship who is appropriate for for the outcome you're looking for. You may feel particularly akin to one. I'm the blacksmith, so you know I feel, you know, the person I talk to the deity or saint I talk to most is the patron of craftsmen. Sure, that makes sense. But if I'm going on a trip, or if I need to close a particularly big deal, maybe I'm going to be talking to the Lady of Merchants or the Lord of Travel, right? And so the depending what a society values, because that's the way I'm doing culture in this game, is cultural groups, then they'll have a subset that are more commonly worshipped than others, and that's when you get into when you're looking at the for example, the worship by state. The Deliverance of the Dawn worships a completely different group of saints and divinities than the Burning Lash, than the Progress Confederacy, just entirely based on what those deities espouse. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So is there a sense within the general society of like prime divinities or ascended saints? Are they actors in the world? Like, are they real beings that I could one day meet? Or is the idea, or is it like we think of them in the same way that, the Greeks thought of their gods? Is like, Zeus might turn up to do some like crazy business, but you'd never know it was him at the time. And like, there's this sort of mythological element. Like,
I think
how real are the gods is my question.
I think it's actually sort of in between the two. There, I sort of, again, without getting too spoilery, there is sort of an understanding that the more influential divinity A is, the more influential divinity B will need to be in reaction, and that starts causing problems. And so a lot of stuff is done in third party unless they think they can get away with it.
Right. But, yeah, of course, because like by is this true? Is it true to say that, because we're not playing D&D anymore, but our characters came from D&D, like if someone wanted to play a cleric of the goddess of fire and took the relevant points to have the magic of the goddess of fire, like would that be seen as a miracle, or like are there like clerics who standardly wield magic related to?
We have been playing a magic moderate world. And so, for lack of a better way of putting it, I think the answer to your question is yes. There's going to be some folk for whom it would be, depending on where they live and their cultural circumstance, what makes the village cleric remarkable is the fact that when he says it's raining today, everyone knows that individual is correct. There's no question that the weather obeys the cleric of the weather god. Whereas in a more cosmopolitan setting, where you have places like Saints Row, where, shrine upon shrine upon shrine, I think it's a little bit more pedestrian that, somebody in that group can do real magic.
Yeah.
Right.
Enough so that, for example, one of the things I've decided upon is, for example, in the Progress Confederacy, regardless of if you're resurrected, the first time you die is when your legacy ends. In other words, if you die either of violence or natural causes in the Progress Confederacy, and let's say you're the Archduke, everything that would happen if you had not been resurrected happens. So your property, everything passes on, except you can continue to live in a nice house and all that stuff, but it's now your son or daughter who is the Archduke.
Right. Yeah. It's like a forced
because otherwise you wind up with nut jobs who start going through power mad connotations, trying to live forever to preserve their power.
Yeah.
So what they've done is that the first time you die, that can be documented.
That's such a Progress Confederacy thing to do.
Yeah, that's
someone
that's
at some point was like, "Hey,
confederacy.
why is the king hoarding all the diamonds that are worth 5,000 gold?"
Yeah. I'm just gonna say now. I'm just gonna say, on the other hand, the Burning Lash is ruled by the Eternal Emperor.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So
and so
they've broken that cycle.
Yeah. So, but again, it's what are the values of the society? That is what's going to drive how magic is viewed, how it is used, why it is used. The Progress Confederacy thinks summoning earth elementals to dig trenches, or channels for shipping is a perfectly reasonable use of an earth elemental. The Deliverance of the Dawn spend an awful lot of time casting the equivalent of Cure Disease. They're not necessarily going to be enslaving elemental creatures to do earthworks. Do you know what I mean? And so again, it comes down to the question: what are the values of the society, and how does that play in?
So then, where do the fiends come in? Are they? Is there any
if you want to use
worship of them, or are they very much like
Okay, so here's a classic example. Alroroth, she's the Mistress of Plagues. That's her thing. If she manifests herself in the real world, a plague breaks out automatically. No saving throw. Everyone within n kilometers gets sick instantly. That's her jam.
Right.
Her agents are known as plague bringers. For lack of a better way of putting it, the Fiends of Opposition are entropy. They are the ultimate expression of disorder. Disorder. It's not it's not chaos. It's disorder. They're here to wreck shit, not out of any sense of malice. It's just literally their job.
Yeah, because I get that for most of the like the one that stands out to me is the Mistress of Desire, because desire is one of those things that we see as very like polarizing in ethical discussions.
I was just going to say the if you will, one of my favorite jokes is the author of Tom Sawyer, whose name now escapes me. American author. Anyway, the quote is everything.
Mark Twain, right?
Mark Twain, thank you. Everything in moderation, especially moderation.
Yeah, sure.
And so, if you will, the thing about all of these, Zolgradar is the master of hate. Hate itself is not necessarily as dumb as it sounds. Hate is not necessarily inherently a bad thing. You can hate something as a motivator to fix it.
Yes.
It's when hate gets overwhelming that it becomes a problem. To the point where you start making dumb choices. And
so the Fiends are then inherently monstrous. They are not.
Yes, they're extreme expressions of a circumstance. Sickness isn't bad inherently. It can cause complications, but a plague is the extreme of sicknesses, right? Yeah. It is where way too many people are sick at once that in itself causes problems. So if you will, the fiends, what makes them fiendish is they are the extremism of a moment to the point where they are destructive.
That's so interesting to me because, like, obviously, I mean, the choice of the name Fiends of Opposition is, I imagine, very careful because I know the way you work, because the way you've described divinities is that they are very generic, broad.
Yes.
Like even, the goddess of fire isn't literally a fire elemental. I mean, she might be, I don't know. But the point is, like, she's not the manifestation of fire. She's the person whose domain is fire.
Yes.
And, or the god rather than person. And so they have like this very, broad sort of generic feel to them. Not generic, as in like.
They have a very wide mandate.
There you go.
Yes,
right.
Yes,
and then to have the monstrous Fiends of Opposition be in opposition to that, like, philosophically as well, to be very narrow and specific, is really interesting to me.
Yeah. And like I say, it is the point of extremism, if you will. And what I mean is, if you view a range of a behavior as a spectrum, they're jammed all the way to one side or the other. In such a way that it begins to cause problems. But yeah, I view from a design point of view, they are, they're essentially entropy expressed, the entropy of the universe expressed.
At the risk of monopolizing, but just this particular conversation, I want to get a couple more questions in, which is the naming convention behind the Fiends of Opposition. They have this like 3-syllabic thing separated by the apostrophes. Is that something character? Like, obviously, we know, if we know anything about the Fiends of Opposition as characters, we would know that that's a thing that they all have. This, is there a story behind that?
Essentially.
In world.
It's Michelle trying to be clever. So I've done enough linguistic studies. I speak English, I speak French, and I've studied Russian. And so I've looked at a couple of other languages, specifically in North America, the First Nations, Mi'kmaq, and Huron. And so what I have and the other one, of course, which fascinates me is the how similar several of the Asian languages are in the way the syllables are constructed, and yet they are so radically different in their implementation. You'd think that 3 letters was going to be a pretty limiting construct, and yet there's this rainbow of diversity that comes out of that. So what I've tried to do with each of the languages is to pin a feeling about the construction down. So if you will, that is the cadence of demonic or of fiendish. And I've actually already had somebody ask me about that. Somebody pointed out to me, asked me, was it intentional if Bahaidia, the Lord of Thieves, I couldn't help but notice has the same convention. I said, yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, of course, this is where I was coming. This is where all these questions were leading to. It's like, it was Bahaidia, originally one of the Fiends of Opposition who became an Ascended Saint, or were all of the Fiends of Opposition originally of this like particular culture that ended this way? Or
so as I just put in the Zoom chat, we can also point out that Ebon Elves also have that same naming convention. Adding to the question of whether whether or not these people are bad. I say very, very much with my tongue very much in my cheek.
Actually, if you take a look, while the Ebon Elves have an absolute adoration of apostrophes, they actually use it. If you actually pay attention, they don't use a 3-word.
There's definitely like more than 3 syllables.
They for them it's the thing that follows. It's the thing that follows a vowel is the way that they use it. It's the point of inflection to denote pronunciation. That's how they. But whereas with the fiends, it is literally each one of those is a unique word. So I actually have a translation guide set aside I can't lay hands onto right away, but Brazgothal literally actually means something relative to what it is he does. It's just that it's a ridiculously old translation, and that has been functionally lost without players actively doing an awful lot of digging.
That's season 12 or something.
Yeah, exactly.
But
it's kind of like the same way that in English right now we say Peter, which is Pierre, which is stone, which is and so nobody wanders over, claps their buddy on the shoulder, and says, "Hey, Rock, how you doing?" Unless we're talking about a guy named Dwayne.
It's a real deep in joke if they are.
Yeah,
but they were
linguistic professors are having a real.
But so that becomes the funny bit, right? Is so a lot of a friend of mine, his last name was Boutelier, which was French for boutelier, which is bottle keeper. So literally in the very same way that Smith was the guy who ran the smithy, boutelier was literally the guy who ran the wine cellar for you. But has just gotten genericized because an awful lot of French and English names, because they were built in a time when there was only one village smith, so John the Smith was pretty obviously who you were talking about. Naming conventions were either locative or performative. So I've been goofing around with those ideas and how different races talk about themselves. So I haven't decided quite what the literal translation of Ramiki's name is. But at the same token, I think everyone remembers the movie title Dances with Wolves. And, the leading lady was Stands with Fist. Right? And to me, those are just very definitive. I just love the idea of a culture that names you based on a formative point of character development. Right?
Yeah, I have that.
So what you're saying is if we ever get, find out what the song's name is, we're going to be like, and how you spell that?
Yeah.
And which inflection is it on that?
Alexandria will never ask any of those questions.
Real difficult to get that with yes or no questions. So
7 years later. Okay, so is that an accent aigu on the last syllable? No. Okay, we'll be back next week.
Yeah. I'm ready for the point at which she just goes, "Are you evil?" That's an option.
Uh-huh.
There are questions that she'll never ask.
Yeah.
Phrase it. Please.
That's one of them.
Phrase in a way that's like even broader.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Like-
hang on.
Is what you're doing bad? No.
Well, exactly.
Yes. Should I be concerned with your actions? No.
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 Should I just keep doing what you say?
Of
Yes.
course. Wait a second. That's yes, no.
Yeah, you ask a
It's
question
an
which
immediate.
just breaks the like his voice goes like, You're like, oh, that's not. That's oh no.
Awkward. Anything else you guys want to chat about?
I guess the ultimate question on that same line of thinking about all the divinities and saints and fiends, all of these are like common knowledge to people. Their existence, not like
Absolutely.
deep down
I think the fiends are probably more obscure than most. I think
monsters to scare noble kids at night.
I was just going to say, yeah, I think, and again, I think it's going to be cultural. I think in a place like the Progress Confederacy, the fiends are just literally in the way. And so we'll bulldoze them when we get to them, but we're not really worried about them otherwise. There's no point in talking about them. I think the Burning Lash and Deliverance of the Dawn probably have radically different views compared to the Progress Confederacy about the significance of the fiends. Yeah, I think, you know, it can be probably guessed that the Deliverance of the Dawn is actively pursuing the agency of the fiends to reduce it, and then it's entirely possible that the Empire of the Burning Lash views them as useful tools. I don't mind if you do plague, just do it over there, please. Right?
Or even, I don't mind if you
plague to them.
Or even, I don't mind if you do plague as long as it's gentle enough that we gain an immunity to it. Like there's positives to things.
Yes,
like,
exactly. But yeah, I suspect, you know, if a plague worshipping cult suddenly pops up in the Progress Confederacy, it's entirely possible that the Burning Lash is using, you know, cultism as the equivalent of a tactical nuclear weapon. You know, we'll summon this thing into somebody else's city. That's a good use for it. You know. So I think when you go sufficiently scholarly, these things become common knowledge. I'm not sure a particular farmer is all that concerned about the Mistress of Puppets.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Who, by the way, I think is probably the most terrifying of all the fiends because because her domain is the most inscrutable to me.
Yes.
Yeah, puppets.
Yes.
Terrifying.
Absolutely terrifying.
Well, I'm just going to say,
We're lucky Drew's not here.
And the description.
Giant noses too.
Well, and it is. I enjoyed writing the way that the I think stylistically I changed the format I even used for describing the fiends. Compared to all of the other ones. But yeah, Kizathgi, it's the father that takes the child on the walk where they pack the snow, throw the ball that moves the stone, that triggers the avalanche, that dams the river, that bursts, that drowns the unassailable fortress city a generation later. Like causality taken to the to the extreme worst. Yeah.
I just made myself laugh because I was like, yes, Kizathi and her avatar, Pinocchio.
Oh my God.
Well, see, Pinocchio is an interesting one because I think he's actually the child of Kisgathi and Master of Lies.
Yeah. But like I say, let's see here. I just want to double check something very quickly.
Only the child of the Mistress of Puppets and the Master of Nightmares is just like He's like, I think I've seen that puppet show. No.
Drew would talk our ear off at this point.
Oh yes.
I'm sure Drew takes great
That's-
offense to them.
They're the ones that have those old
the evil
those
thing.
those countryside hotels, and you go into the room and you open the thing, it's just full of puppets. And he's like, well, I'm staying locked. That make any puppet that just looks like just looks actually like a person. He's like, no.
You can't
Stop
pay me. So
We used to have.
I have a question,
Yeah.
Michelle, based on a conversation that I had earlier today, actually.
Mhm.
The question is, how much of what is being discussed right now are you coming up with on the spot? Because
yes,
that's something that I realized that I was doing this morning, and someone would sort of ask me a question and I'd be like, yeah, this is absolutely something that I've thought of before, and this is the answer I'm giving. Quick, make a note about it, and now it's true.
Okay, so I mean,
What's the joke where it's like, wow, GM, how are you able to make all these stories? It's so incredible that you have this all planned and ready, and then the GM looks down at their notes, it just says "sexy goblins?" ? Yeah. Yeah.
So a certain amount of it is I use sort of three. I use a triangle, if you will. I call it a three-legged stool upon which my genius rests.
Yes.
So
one must rest it somewhere.
Exactly. So the first bit is bluntly I'm trying to restrict my egomania and presuming you folks are all as bright as I am. And so I pay a lot of attention to what you folks say. And so
I didn't know that.
Yeah. I do that actually for every game I play in. Because to me, it was a discussion we got into about railroads earlier, right? It's cool if everyone understands you're getting on my roller coaster. Hang on tight. You have to be this tall and make sure the bloody belt's tied on. All right. And then everyone goes, cool, I'm down for this. And you just go slaloming through and you roll dice where appropriate. But at the end of the day, the chain of events is locked. The players are literally along for the ride. And that's cool for some players. As long as everyone understands that's a lot of my players don't want that style of gaming anymore. They're very, very anti-railroad, if you will. They like the roller coaster, but they want to be able, but they also want a control that lets them be left or right randomly. Okay. They don't care about the ups and downs, but they want the left and right option. Okay, I'm good with that. So what I'm always doing is listening to the players for what left and right sound like. And bluntly, if they come up with a better solution than I do, I will just declare them to be right. That's the first thing I do. And I think that's important because one of two things, there's a couple things. Like I say, first off is you're all at least as smart as I am. And so it would be, I'm not even
tiring.
Sure hubris. I'm not even sure hubris covers it to just ignore all of that creativity at the table and think somehow my ideas are better. I don't want to be that guy. So I do pay attention to what you folks are saying, and if someone says, "Oh, this would be cool," would it? Does it fit? Yeah, it does fit, and that would be cool. Let's do that.
Yeah.
Other times, I'm just going to go, "No, that's completely the wrong direction for how I want this game to go." So, no, we're not doing that, but it's an interesting idea. I'll keep it in mind for future in case it fits somewhere else. So, the second thing I'm always doing is I tend not to write plots so much as I tend to write motivational speeches. So what I know is who the bad guys are and what they want, who the good guys are and what they want. And my terminal condition is the bad guys are going to win. That is my base state. The reason we're telling this story is because the bad guys are going to win. The only thing I don't know is how the players screw it up.
Yeah.
So that actually unlimbers me from a certain level of having to have written tons of material ahead. Because what I'm really doing is my ad lib is based on essentially role playing. I know what the good guys want. I know why they're doing what they're doing. I know what the bad guys want. I know what they're doing. And so for me, it's not so much ad libbing as informed decision making. I don't need to write everything out. What I need to know is who the actors are well enough that when one of them has to do or say something, that their action is internally consistent.
Yeah.
I
So, like, as an example, and I might be wrong on this, but my guess is you didn't know who Aquidian Dashamali was when we were doing the arc about destroying the mill over in Breezy Point Bay.
Okay,
right?
so I knew he
You
existed.
You probably had an idea that there was like an old school businessman or something that was like who was funding this thing. But my guess is like you didn't have all of the stuff that you have about Ebon Elves now in our world ready to go at that moment.
It's a split decision. So I knew that it was going to be the Ebon Elves. I knew why it was going to be the Ebon Elves, but I didn't know who.
Yeah. Okay. There you go.
So,
so those characters like didn't exist, but they did.
It wasn't. It wasn't me worth putting. So, for lack of a better way of putting it, I have actually. Let me just give you the background on this. I may have mentioned it prior in a different thing. I actually have two 20mm thick binders handwritten of a campaign I've never run. I've never been able to get that campaign past the prologue. It is a fully detailed 3-year campaign with every step of the thing written out, all of the major NPCs detailed, a complete pantheon and how they work, and 2,000 years of history detailed in decades. I've never run that campaign.
And I love you to death, Michelle. You probably never will, but you should write the book. I mean, you're a novelist, do it.
Yeah, but that's the point. And so, you know, it literally took me 2 full summers of my life to write that. Yeah. And just, okay, I'm just not ever doing that again. Because what I learned was that what I want out of a game, unless I'm willing to sit the players down and say, just so we're clear about this, you're getting on my railroad. Hang on, you need to be this tall and make sure the seatbelt's on tight.
Yes.
But that's not my style of GMing, it turns out. I don't actually enjoy that as a GM. Like, if we're going to do a one-shot on a weekend, sure, I'll grab a module off the wall, we'll do pre-rolled characters, and we'll just drop in, roll dice, blow shit up, and go giggle, and eat some pizza. You know, that's... Yeah. But for a campaign, I just can't run it. Me cannot run a game that way. So instead what I do is I block out the immediate future and then the near future and a vague sketch about the far future. And then I let the players fill in the details as we go. I had no idea when you guys got to the end, when you were done with the mill, for all I knew, you guys were going to go turning around and head off to go explore those caves. Down to the south of the area you were in. Or you were going to suddenly say, I can't help but notice there's a lost warlock tower here that no one has ever survived. Hey, it's our turn. Okay, hang on while I write that whole chunk. So there was literally no point in prepping a bunch of Ebon Elves you might not meet.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I absolutely.
I knew, like I said, I
knew. And if it gets to that moment where, you know, we succeed enough rolls on interrogating people and say, who do you work for? Then that's the moment to make up the generic lie, and that will become truth.
Yeah. So what I call it, the joke I use all the time is it's the quantum state. It's quantum state storytelling.
Yeah.
Until it needs to be observed, we don't need to know the value. Once it is observed, that is forever the value that exists in this game world.
Yes.
And that allows everyone the opportunity to be right and wrong, without having to stress too much about the details until it actually happens. So, like I say, I roughly knew who Rachel Gray was and how it was that they were doing things. That, you know, obviously enough, she, you know, Rachel can't be in 2 places at once, yet she was clearly managing to do that at least once. So eventually the players were going to ask about that. So I knew she had a stand-in, and I knew it was Lacoon, and I know roughly why. But the rest of if you never actually physically met Rachel, the details were just irrelevant. Yeah. But because of chain of events, you actually get to meet her. Now, I spent my game prep working out in advance who Rachel is, so I look terribly clever when the camera gets turned on, right?
And then you have to deal with the fact that our campaign has turned into a romance, and Chantel is chasing the giant.
I am in the process of turning. I'm in the process of turning every single campaign that I am in into a romance. Every single one. I'm on my way. I'm working on it.
I see.
To be fair,
just give me time.
I don't exactly like not enable you in this way.
You know what? You know what's really funny about that? You made it that way.
Yeah, that makes
You,
sense.
Jamie,
Yeah,
you, Jamie,
a lot of sense.
specifically in the very, like, when we first started, like, RPing in chat, started calling Lucas and Alexandria lovebirds.
Yeah.
That was not something that we did. That was not something we intended on doing. That's not something that ever.
I know that.
You were the original shipper.
You were the original shipper.
Like
so,
I
and
do.
so now there's a random ship somewhere in the universe that's
I
sailing.
absolutely love that you as Jamie did that, but also that Jasper did that.
Yeah.
But then you've also shown that it's not because Jasper believes that's to be true. It's just because he likes needling both of them. Because you then like immediately did it with other people.
True. And here we go. Now here's some like internal character spoilers. Spider actually believes they would be a very effective and powerful couple, and that so
matchmaking.
There's actually like, while yes, like level 1 is, oh, this is a funny joke I can keep needling them with. Level 2 is also it lays the groundwork for later when they are ready to accept that this is a good thing, which may never happen.
Funny.
It's like, what is Spider
somehow have
managed
right
to get
now
the Donadu and the
like,
Edgewater families working together. Like,
Spider's like super objective at this point is political reform with Lucas at the head of it, which sounds bizarre when you've seen how Lucas acts, but somewhere in Spider's mind that makes sense.
He is ultimately a good person.
That's it, right? And
good
Spider
people don't
like
make good
fundamentally
lawmakers.
believes that society should be run by a good person or by good people, and that it isn't currently.
Good
And it
people
doesn't
don't
matter
make
that.
good politicians necessarily. So
That's 100%. I'm not saying
flawed.
Spider's like right about this. I don't think Spider
Spider.
has any idea what he's doing. But it's like it's the childish dream, right? You know, they were kids together, and the idea was we could be heroes like our grandfather. We could live in the world where everything is better. And then Spider's had this terrible like change of fortune.
You've also got like,
and seeing the dark, like the terrible side of things.
Like Jasper of the Edgewater children is the youngest, and obviously got the shortest of sticks.
Yes.
But it's like in terms of which sibling does the youngest child look up to? Of the 3 that are available to you, it's like, you know, 2 of them aren't great.
yeah, that's fair.
And one of them, and the other one is Lucas. So it's like
garbage fire humans. It's like, oh, the sweet doofus.
The sweet doofus.
I mean, he's also, you know,
like what's like the sister? I think at one point I thought of the sister as like basically Alexandra, but like actively awful. Like if Alexandre put effort into being a terrible, just to being terrible to people, you kind of end up. Because
I mean, the sister is like book one
opposite sides of a similar coin.
Like she's the terrible, privileged, noble kid.
Like you both Alexandre and the sister whose name I'm blanking on are coming from that very that privileged upbringing, that active in court, very good at being active in court. But the Edgewater sister is just like relishes being awful to people, and using that ability to like actively cause harm. And he's like, it wouldn't be difficult for Alexandre to do that, but she doesn't because
chooses not to.
Yeah. She looked at her. You looked down at the character sheet, saw the alignment, and went, "No, that's not."
Yeah. Look at. I've already built this character.
There's a G there somewhere. It's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. It exists.
Eleonora is the name.
Eleanor, right?
Have to go digging in my files for that.
And I just remember the elder brother is just the father 2.0.
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, that can't be that great. Because like he's not that great, so whatever.
I think what's interesting about that is like I don't think look, this is going super deep. I'm like stuff that doesn't really exist yet. But I think that older brother Victor is like wants to be Father 2.0 but isn't bright enough, and Lucas is bright enough but doesn't want to be.
I having started, it's only since I've been doing like live stream games, and I don't know if it's just because we just happen to have in every stream that I ended up in, someone was playing this brand of character. I have, in every instance, my favorite character in the group has been the character who is essentially high intelligence, low wisdom.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't think I've ever played that character. I don't know if I would do well at playing that character, but I love that character.
That character is fun to play.
I want to watch that. Yeah. Well, you were playing that character in the
That's why I can tell you. That's why I'm
blanking on
enlighten you.
I feel awkward.
It's so fun.
Sage. You were playing Sage, and Sage was that person. And then, why am I blanking on all the characters' names? It's far too late. The other twin in
Nora was
also that highly intelligent, highly capable.
Oh yeah.
No willpower or sometimes no impulse control, and it's just like So watch
Drew also specializes in these characters.
This is Drew. This is Drew's character type. Like that's his archetype for characters.
Yeah. Well, I think, but the realization was basically like, oh, this is the character I like. They're all like Lucas. It's like Lucas is that shiny example. Yeah. This is the text of how to do this, because you just stare at him and be like, well, I don't understand. Which, playing as a robot makes it even better.
Oh yeah.
Chevalier can struggle with people at the best of times. So
and then comes
Lucas is just like, but I also like particularly also like talking just like general, like just behind the scenes character stuff. One of the things that has also been highlighted, and this is something I definitely already knew, but it was very apparent in this game, was that I always really like, in any creative industry, like when I was doing writing at university and stuff like that, the same thing happened when you're doing creative things, is when like the character sort of takes the pen, goes, excuse me, I need to make a note. And you go, huh? What? That's, oh, I didn't know that.
Yes.
Okay. And this like, because like my initial image of Chevalier is not that.
Mm-hmm.
It was like physically it was that white mask thing was always very much there. But I actually legitimately, I spent a long time trying to find the picture that inspired that. And I'm like, I'm sure there was a film or a game or something, and there was like this thing with a white mask, and I can't find it. And I never did. I just found another film that did it basically, did a similar thing to this. I went, that's what I want. I've never seen that movie. I've never seen it. And this was an idea I've had for a while. So I was like, I don't know where I got this idea from. I don't know where it came from, but okay, here's a thing I can give to an artist. They'd be like this, please. And they'll make something. They'll make that. But also just like workshopping characters as well when you're sort of trying to develop it and you start going. And sure tell, you're very good at like that sort of like asking those questions. And you do that in like acting. You like ask questions like, what does your character think about this? And you go, oh, I haven't thought of that. What does my character think of this? And you get better at that question as you go along. You get much better at knowing that answer, but you end up getting sometimes the answer is not what you thought it was going to be. And it's that I enjoy that moment.
So what have you been, so for a lot of you, just go around, just kind of curious, what's your favorite bit so far in the campaign?
Oh God.
What's the moment that you kind of went, okay, that set the campaign for me?
Oh.
Those are different questions, Michelle.
Okay, well, so pick the one that's easiest for you.
One that stands out. That actually like on-screen moment.
The
was not even technically on screen, I guess, was that the fight with Lucas. Because that was literally, it wasn't it was on screen that we did it, but like initially it was just literally my thought was like the character thought was basically we can't train Lucas to do this the same way we trained Alexandre because A, his connection isn't as strong, and B, he's not the same person. They're very different people. And it took us, and like Alexandre practicing took, better part of like 2 years or something like that. Or a year or two. I don't remember
just one
exactly. It was like, it was a year of getting used, like where if we want to do this quickly, and then the thought of, well, he's a soldier, he's used to like training that is designed to push you, that pushes you to that limit. The idea of like pushing you to that limit so that you can then push past it.
Yes.
So the thinking being, if we can push the soldier to the point where all of his martial skill can't help him anymore, and he has to reach in and pull deep and find something he hasn't used before, he might find the magic.
Right.
And Chevalier was confident that he could toe that line, that he could like, I have enough precision that I can get to that place. Except that, and then at the end of the episode, we literally just went, this is a thing that happens. But then Lucas decided he was going to write his internal moment for that, and he made it much more harrowing. Where like his prosthetic gets broken, his internal dialogue was just like blame almost, like, why have I been put in this situation? At which I was like, you agreed, but at the same time, it's like that doesn't ultimately matter. He's still it's a scary place to be. And that moment for Chevalier being like Chevalier's like his, I think it was like the line was to Alexandre was, you make the best decision you can make with the information you have, and you be ready to accept the consequences.
Yes.
And he ultimately felt he didn't do that because he went to the most expedient option, which is not the same thing. Right. And he also didn't consider, and like the conversation then afterwards with the elf being like, well, obviously he'd react that way, look at him. And Chevalier being like, I didn't take that into consideration, and you're entirely correct. And if I had, I would know that his limit that I have to push him to is much further down than
almost anybody else you would have had.
Than almost anyone else. But also that like even like Chevalier was sort of like, yeah, if it gets too much, he'll just say stop. And then it's like, no, he won't. No, of course he won't. And then as soon as it pointed out, he's like, yeah, no, that's really obvious. I should have, but I didn't think about it. And that realization of just like, but it's a combination of realization for Chevalier is like, for Chevalier, it's like he sort of itemizes things a little bit. Like these people are like companions. Like he often, he put, Alexandre is Alexandre, the brothers are either the brothers or they are, Mr. Edgewater and Mr. Kilcare.
Yes.
But that's that moment where, and we ended up, like all three of us ended up doing like an internal dialogue where that ends on when my version of, I now need to help my friend. Right. Where it's like I'm going to force my traveling companion to use magic, and it ends with I need to help my friend. And that was his moment of realization of like, I've A, gone too far, and B, these two people are not just traveling companions. And
I like
for Chevalier, that's a big deal.
Yes. That is a major transformational moment. I like that.
Yeah. It's not quite got to the point where it's absolutely codified, because they're like, essentially for Chevalier to like change that designation, that's the next step.
Yeah.
But he's at the point where it's like, I need to consider that I might do that.
Cool.
And that was his realization.
Very cool. What do you think, Jamie?
Yeah, lots of things jump to mind. I think there are two very different questions that you asked, like favorite moments of the campaign versus
favorite moment for the campaign is Lucas getting multiple 20s on knowing what lizard folk are.
That is,
that's a good
that's up there.
When he crit both times on the knowledge roll of what do you know about lizard folk, it's just like,
wrote a dissertation on them.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say. So Professor Edgewater says,
the idea that like this image of like his professors trying to force him to academia, and he's like, nah, but I'm gonna join the military, and like them like breaking their yardstick or something. It's so angry. Like, are you kidding me? No.
What are you doing?
It's just,
oh, that's lovely.
Yeah, because there's, I mean, favorite moments in the campaign. There's a couple that stand out, and then you also asked about like formative like moments where the campaign clicked in. I don't know what the wording you used was, but I have a couple. Favorite moments include, and these are like two sort of diametrically opposed favorites for different reasons. The reams of love poetry that Drew wrote as a distraction.
Oh my god! Yeah.
For me to steal something.
Can't decide if it was bad or perfect.
It was.
Yes.
It was both.
But probably both.
Yeah. The answer to that
yes. That that was the funniest. No, oh my god! I just laughed so hard in that episode, and you know,
it's like
why do we play games if not to have fun? And
it felt like it was simultaneously perfectly Lucas and perfectly Drew.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. So that was beautiful. I mean, my personal favorite moment in the campaign, narratively, it was the moment you dropped the penny for me. It's like I got to ask this question, and you said, "Oh yeah, this guy might be the bad guy," and it you know, like finding out that Aquidian had the plans to the mill on his desk was just like, oh no, never saw it coming. And I mean, like we all had our suspicions about the Dashamalis and about Aquidian at various points in time, but that I didn't see coming. And like having all those like penny drops like simultaneously was great for me. That I love that shit.
Yeah.
Yes.
I absolutely adored the way you role played that moment. Just immediately jumping.
Oh yeah, and then rolling a 3 or whatever it was in response to that moment was just the icing on the cake. I feel like if I had rolled high on that roll, I would have felt somewhat like it wouldn't have felt right.
It wouldn't have fit with
because I
your
like
response.
Okay, so I guess we're now one up on Aquidian, and it's so much more interesting for us to not be like. Love that.
A dear friend of mine uses the phrase that every once in a while the dice tell the story, and that was exactly what that moment was.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, there was also a moment where you guys let me quote like something like 250 seconds worth of A Knight's Tale. So like.
The tournament.
The tournament is a whole one.
Like up to including just yelling at you afterwards. Like having Chevalier just like, no, this is actually not okay. I have to have a stern conversation right now.
Yes.
Yeah.
That I've been sitting here making a list of all the formative moments, and that's on that list.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That is on the list. There's also the like killing in session 1. Bam.
Oh,
I was
yeah.
like, okay, this is what I'm playing.
Yeah.
Oh,
this is what I'm playing. Cool. Got it. And then Spider pointing his sword at Alexandri, like straight after that battle. I was like, oh, okay, cool. This is where we're at. And then Spider also like being the whole torture sequence.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Sure.
All of that.
I for that moment, I had briefly sort of message Jamie like, what do you reckon about we do this? And in my head, my idea for Chevalier is that in the previous adventuring party that he was in, of the characters that I have fleshed out, like the sort of face of the party, like Elena was that as well, but one of the characters is basically like a roguish bard essentially. So that guy, and then like Elena's friend, like with the 3 that I knew the most about, and sort of the other people have sort of slowly developed as well. But this idea of this very capable, like, you know, charismatic person, in the form of Marcus is his name.
Yes.
But would have like an ongoing, not con, but like bit with Chevalier, where it's like you can do a thing where Chevalier just needs to be threatening, and he can just leverage that. But it's at no point do either of them intend to actually do anything. So it's entirely just like a con. It's just we're tricking this person into thinking they're in a situation
Yeah.
that neither of them have any intention. And so he's like, I think Jasper might be capable of doing that as well. We could give that a go and get this information. And then going into that room and being like, he doesn't know what to con. He doesn't know. No.
That's a
no. Mistake. I've made so many mistakes. No.
That moment was like, so that was where we got to see Spider's history, like on display, right? Because it's like he's been this like sort of semi-face with the disguise stuff. There's like a lot of the roguish stuff that he'd done up to that point was like, oh yeah, this could be any lovable rogue, right?
Yeah.
And
it's like, I had a rogue friend in my previous one. I now have another rogue friend. That's probably the same. No, it's not. Chevalier just because he can't show expression, he's just like screaming internally.
Yeah.
It's like, please, I need you to crack
silently in your heart.
I need you to give us a bit of information so we can stop. Oh God.
This is the thing. That moment was where worlds collided, like Spider. Interrogation in Spider's underworld life involved people getting seriously hurt and all going missing forever. And
which again for Chevalier, it's often the thing like this will probably work, and they're like, I didn't consider this one part. Oh no, no.
And which is particularly interesting from an Alexandre standpoint, because during the pre-game chat, you had said to Alexandre, no, I've never killed anyone. No, I don't hurt people. Yeah. If you go back into the chat, there was a point where Spider said that. And I was like, okay. And then walked into
Chevalier, I was like, there's no way I said that to you. No way.
No, there's no way Chevalier said that. But there was running back into that room is just Alexandre, like that gif of like everything's burning.
Spider was definitely lying at all throughout.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That was a formative moment for her. Of like, oh, don't trust him. I get it. I see.
Yeah. Not the cuddly spider type. No cuddly spider here.
I think one of the formative moments of learning your style of GMing, Michelle, was asking to cast, what was it? Detect magic.
Yes.
Right. Yes.
That, and then going, oh, it's not just an earring. We take off the earring. Oh, it's a completely different person. Okay, then. That was the first one.
Like that later moment when we're having this debate of like, how do we handle this person? What do we do with
that
this
entire moralistic
person? Which is it was like the fallout was interesting as well. Like I think like Chevalier and Alexandre ended up having a more pointed conversation about it, being like, this was awkward. Why we need to? I want to know more. But I quite like the bit where it was like, because like Jamie, you knew we had like a wanted poster from like the beginning,
from episode 2 or 3. Yeah.
So you
early on
knew that we.
I think our first arrival in,
but it hadn't like come up. But at the same time, so when this whole thing of like, maybe we should listen to this person because of that, but we can't. I don't want to like we don't want to play our hand and give her more information than we need to. So Jasper and Alexandre can go off and have it explained. All right, then Alexandre and Chevalier will go off.
Yes.
Except that in that very opening fight, like Chevalier had noted the fact that they were clearly after Alexandre and himself. They didn't care about the brothers.
Yeah.
He's like, so the entire time he's literally been like, someone's after us. He's gone through his little black book. He's like, none of these names make sense to be that person. So there is an entity that not only knows that we've left like very quickly, but specifically wants us, which is like, which is why Chevalier has a working theory that there's an anti-song. There is a opposite to the song.
Yes.
That has its own herald that is doing its own thing, and has thoughts about that when we got teleported to the river, but he doesn't that,
which is another moment,
which was also great because like Lucas only talked to Alexandre about that and didn't mention it to Chevalier, and Chevalier has a very different take on that moment than Alexandre does. But going off and Alexandre being like, yeah, look, maybe we need to do something about this person because, you know, we've got this bounty. It turns out we've got a bounty. And Chevalier being like, yeah, I know that. I've known that for a while. And then having also sudden realization of, oh, Jasper wants to kill her now. and just being like, yeah, oh, so sprint. just turn around and sprint as fast as possible back to this person. Like, we know, no. No, this is not new information. We don't, it's fine. Don't worry about it.
Keep going, Sean.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the only, like, new information in there was that the bounty was on all of us at once, which is
I was like, that's interesting. But
formative stuff is really interesting to me because there's sort of like two halves for me. Like, I love the whole first arc, you know, the D&D arc was that there's so many formative moments in there because, you know, it's the first 10 episodes of a campaign.
Right.
And, but I mean, like, it lands on episode, like, the first one is episode 1 where I roll 3 1s in a row, you know, and it's just like, oh, I get it. Like, I'm this character in this arc. I'm the hyper capable person who fails at everything.
Well,
and then, and just discovering, like,
combat.
our characters together, you know, like, working with Drew, just like, it came so naturally for us to do the brotherly thing, and that was cool. I didn't know to expect that. I didn't know how much we were going to play into that stuff, and like I don't even know what the first moment of like Edgewater Brothers rapscallionry was, but I'm sure it was great, and every other moment has been great too. But the actual moment where like everything dropped in for me, I think this was maybe our last episode of D&D or our first episode of Open Legend. Where we got on the boat to head out of Breezy Point Bay to.
That'd be the first episode of.
That would be the first episode.
Open Legend.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so. And Sam, you and I had a conversation, or Spider and Chevalier had a conversation on the boat with the other two asleep, and it was just this moment of like. Of seeing trajectory where these two characters who both have like this caretakery aspect to them, you know, very, very, very different ways of being caretakers, but like where they came together and were like, I guess we're doing this together now. It was almost, there was this weird sort of moment of like, two single parents being like, are we gonna co-parent?
We're gonna have to
because we sort of seem to be on the same path. And it was just such a like an earnest conversation.
The lovely scoundrel
about
that's it. The older brother.
I don't know what's worse, the fact that you did that or the fact I recognized it.
There was a moment I started and I was like, how does this actually go?
Yeah.
How does okay.
It's been a while.
I like probably the utterly most formative thing for me was not on screen. It was definitely when because a bit of like, you know, how the sausage is made, I guess. When we were first discussing Michelle, you said each character needs to have at least a connection to another character. And I was being, I don't want to say difficult, but I was being difficult about who I was going to play, because I kept suggesting characters that didn't really work for, which it wasn't this world, it was a slightly different world, but it just didn't really work. And so it wasn't until we moved the story to this one, and I was like, wait, my first character actually now works. But it meant that like we'd established that Luke, you know, Jamie and Drew, their characters are brothers, and Chantel had established a lot of stuff about her character, but also her grandmother and all this other stuff. And I was like, well, it makes sense that my character is connected to Chantel's character.
Mm-hmm.
How does that work? I sort of ended up, I was like, well, the grandmother did stuff. What if and I'm potentially ageless, so it's like, well, that's where that comes into it. But the original like the two like formative things that have created Chevalier was realizing that, at least in the previous version of Warforged in Dungeons and Dragons, that if you played a barbarian, they could technically wear heavy armor.
Mm-hmm.
You could get a barbarian wearing heavy armor without losing rage.
Yeah.
And if you play an ancestral guardian as a Warforged, you can refluff the spirits as drones.
Mm-hmm.
And I just liked that a lot. So I was like, oh, that's what we're going to do. But the original character was going to be, I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with the game Apex Legends, but there's a character called Pathfinder who is basically a robot trying to find his creator, but has a very sort of naive, cheerful demeanor.
Mm-hmm.
And that was going to be like Chevalier. Like, I think I was thinking about when I was trying to like voice it, there was things like, oh, good, another group of friends. I sure hope we don't have to kill this group. And it's like, we had to kill our friends again. Hopefully next time it will be better. And just having that sort of like almost childish naivety in a murder bot. And that was like the original, slightly like comedic, slightly sort of, but also highly terrifying. And then,
sorry, I'm just gonna say, HK11 is played by C3PO. I mean,
yeah, like, you're not wrong. But then, like, as we sort of were doing, like, before we started doing like behind the scenes workshopping and stuff, and with like basically getting Chantel and I basically bouncing Alexandre and Chevalier off each other, and just sort of seeing what will happen. Like, it very quickly became apparent, like, well, not only is that like this, like, the more silly part of that doesn't make a lot of sense. That would be closer to what he was like when he first wakes up with the grandmother. But we're like 50 years later, and he's done a bunch of stuff. So that's not really who he would be anymore. And he sort of ends up with other things. But I think at one point, I'm probably paraphrasing, but again, very tongue-in-cheek, talking to Chantel, was like, damn it, Chantel, I was supposed to make a naive, comedic robot who's like, who think, and instead you decided that he would have to have this teenaged friend who he feels incredibly protective of, and now all of a sudden, you know, I'm this older guardian. I'm playing the emotional core of the group. I was supposed to be the comedic relief without missing a beat. And I'm probably paranoid. Like, Chantel was like, I was supposed to play the young, confident femme fatale, and you gave me an older mentor she could be vulnerable with. I was just like, well, I guess we both played ourselves.
We both done goofed.
Yeah, well, look. And then probably just burst out laughing because it was just like,
oh yeah.
I can't remember what I thought of it, or Chantel was like, you know, we're basically the butler and the main character from Princess Diaries, right?
Yeah.
And I went, oh God, we're the butler and the main character from Princess Diaries. I'm the butler if played by Vision from the MCU. This is what's happened. And I was like, oh. Right, I know who this person is now. Let's go. I got this.
All right, Chantel, anything else for you? You want to throw on the pile there? The boys have been enthusiastically enthusiastic.
I think the only other big formative moment, because I kind of think of formative moments as me learning about all the characters, and I think one of Chevalier's big formative moments, from my perspective, is just realizing he has to tell us off. Like, there's no option not to. He has to, because no one else is going to be mature enough to get anything done.
That was the same.
Now, listen.
You heard me. I said what I said.
There was a degree of realization for Sam in that regard. It's like, I'm the older one. I'm literally the older, more experienced person in this group, and I'm with a bunch of like early 20s, late teens.
I was just going to say.
We want to change the world and have the power to do it.
I was just going to say, so in other words, the real campaign theme here is a mix between Kindergarten Cop and Adventures in Babysitting.
Yeah.
Like,
I don't want to say you're right.
Well, I mean,
but
it's
also
also,
don't
I mean,
wanna
it's
say you're
Kindergarten
wrong.
Cop and Terminator as well.
Yeah.
trying to remember what it was. It was like,
That's right. Just
it was when we had like first, we're looking at like, I can't remember, like when we were first trying to find the lizard folk, and it just didn't work out. We literally got tricked.
We went round and round in a swamp
by
like 3
a
episodes.
setup that the lizard folk purposely put there to trick people. Like we got completely fooled, and like Alexandre and like Jasper end up getting at it, being like this sort of blame, and this adventure, but like as I kind of not necessarily from the outside because I'm obviously in the game, but Chevalier being like, we didn't do anything wrong. Also, everyone actually did quite well, but we're still yelling at each other. So stop that. Turn this adventure around. And just be like, but like, but again, like for me, it was like, yeah, that's like Lucas is gonna get involved if not. Like that he has to be that guy to be like, children, no. Just pack it in. Of course, having said that,
you're also the robot in a tux, though.
Oh, dude, that's also because I'm still me.
Yeah.
I can want my character to be as serious as I damn well
sequence.
please. He's going to end up being sassy, making sassy jokes. Like it's just, I can't not.
You don't know how.
We can keep that going. But I did like that thing. Like I did very much enjoy. I don't know if dovetailing is the correct term here, but like having a conversation with Lucas being this like, I don't know how to tell. How can I tell what you're thinking? Like how would I tell when you're joking? How would I tell when you're laughing? And I'm just being like, well, you get used to it. You can work it out. But then like when both him and Alexandre were hungover and Chevalier just like kicks open the door and is like, I brought food. And like but purposely make sure everything becomes bright. He's just putting like, food under their noses. And he's just like, this is me laughing.
I love
just for future reference.
Yeah, that was
like,
great.
It was basically this moment of like, oh, I can do this. Let's which we felt the tuxedo was as well. I was like, I think I can do this. And I think I can get away with it in a kind of like, look for forgiveness rather than permission kind of moment of like.
So interestingly enough, the reason I that's actually not a thing I would have normally let players do, because it kind of nicks agency away from other players, but in an indirect sort of way, it's antagonistic and stuff like that. But I had a player come to me in one of my other campaigns with a character design, which I literally jokingly summarized as the Elven Barbarian Doom Princess. Literally, so if you can imagine, so it's the Duchy of the Mist setting, and the idea is there's a clan of barbarian elves who the clan concept is they're psychopomps. And so as a culture, they are psychopomp. And it was like, and my mom is the current ruler. And the conflict for the characters, the eldest daughter, she's supposed to take over from mom because it's a matriarchy, but daughter is young and wants to go out and party and adventure. So getting pulled in two directions. Does that fit in your campaign world? And my first reaction, which I did not say, was, "Are you drunk?" Like, why would you come here drunk? I mean,
Why would you turn up to work drunk?
And then he said, so like, I said, no, it absolutely does not fit. Give me a day to think about this.
Yeah.
So the next day we chatted, he says, what do you think? I said, it still doesn't fit, but I'm currently rewriting the map so it does.
Yeah.
Because it was just such a radical, off-the-wall idea that it was one of those moments I realized, again, the player here actually has a better idea than I do about some of what could be, right?
Yeah.
And so, interestingly enough, so after I did that, it was like, and I've seen how that's played out in the game and what interesting knock-on effects it's had in terms of the interrelationships between the players and the culture in general for the campaign. When you started coming up with these off-the-wall things about, hey, can I just do this? Yes, absolutely. My brain is going, don't do it! But no, go ahead and try that. Let's see what happens.
I generally like, and from a player obviously as well, but also if I'm running the game, is like things that are like, like in terms of like the tuxedo, it's like there's a whole bunch of stuff we could have played out. We could have tried to have him do this conversation. Could have done anything like that, but I kind of just dropped it on everyone. I'm just doing a thing because I think it'll be cool. But like the specific for me was like, this is not giving me a mechanical advantage. I'm not like giving myself a magic item or something. I'm giving him a pair of clothing, which could easily just be taken away at the end. Just be like, yeah, no, but we have to.
Yeah, but the thing
I ended up liking it much. I was like, nah, maybe just keep this. We can just justify him keeping this.
Well, yeah, but for me, the part that really was the icing on the cake was the WWE style entrance with the flashy lights and the smoke machine. It was just like, let's just ramp this. Okay, let's just turn this up.
Part of it was literally just like, we have time until the party. What does everyone else do? And I was like, I don't think Chevalier has anything to do. So everyone else can just do their own thing. And I sat there and was like, well, just thinking, what could he be doing? And I was like, hang on.
I've got a bit.
I messaged, it might have been Chantel. I messaged someone to be like, it's a timeline. If I think I could justify the timeline.
Yeah, you messaged.
And it was like, and ultimately it was like, this is like, I don't think I could really, can't make a 7 foot tall, 3.5 foot wide person tuxedo in 8 hours. You just, no. But at the same time, magic exists. And so that's whatever.
Yeah.
And eventually it was like, the more fun version is they did. So how, like, magic tailoring, let's go.
Yep.
Elves could probably do that. And it's just sort of like, and like, I've had that kind of attitude, but then have with people who are like trying to use it to gain, like, but I did a thing, and so I get stuff now. And you're like, no, I just want a fun thing where you can be cool. I don't need you to.
Sometimes the stuff you get is the moment in the spotlight. Smile and enjoy it. Yeah.
You're not. This is not to get the shiny sword or something. This is just a cool moment we can all enjoy. I was like that.
All right, Shawnee. Anything else?
The only other thing I think has been Alexandri's relationship with the song, as that's been developing, has been fun.
In what way?
In a few different ways. One of them being just like everyone learning about it, because it's been sort of a growth thing with everyone, but also like the more that she's communicating with it, the more zealous she's becoming, but also the worse the questions she's asking become. I think.
Yeah. No. So
if that makes sense, like it's.
Yeah. So from what I'm seeing is there's this sort of she's curating her own question list to get the answer she wants to hear.
Yes. That's
which is
exactly
absolutely
it.
Symptomatic of zealotry, by the way.
Yes, it's like I refuse to think anything outside of this. Therefore, I am going to say, let's ignore that and ask this question.
Yeah, and that is one of the delightful things I've noticed about the character. She keeps asking questions that confirm. She keeps doing the research that confirms her bias.
Yes.
Right, and I mean, where I know that you're a PhD student in progress, I know you know better, so I know that's a conscious choice for your character. So I just find that hysterically amusing, right?
Oh yeah, I know how to ask better questions than that. I'm also a psychologist. Like, if I can't ask better questions than that, we have a problem.
A different game, Chantel and I had a whole conversation where essentially my character was trying to describe modern feminism to a Victorian gentle lady. And I, as Sam, at one point was like, how are you not getting this? And then immediately was like, no, wait, Chantel obviously knows this. Chantel knows this back to front, obviously better than me. you're doing it on purpose.
Oh, you're
This is a
good at acting.
doing a thing.
Oh,
All
you're
right.
role playing, you brat. How could you dare role
but it's also-
play?
And then you took that whole conversation and like twisted it in game. It's just like, remember you told me this? Like,
Yeah.
not what I meant.
Yeah. Oh man, that was fun. Anything anyone tells me, anything any character tells my character in game, I will use. My character takes on, and I guess I'm also listening, because any character that tells my character
Anything you
something,
say can
that
and will be
information is
used
taken
against you.
on. Yeah, anything you say in canon will 100% be used. I will take that information, I will use it as the character, and then any die rolls I make around that influence how the character perceives it. So if I roll poorly on something and I roll poorly on it 2 or 3 times, the character's poor at that thing. Like even if the character rolls well, I'm not going to role play that the character does well at it. I assume that the character can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
So perception for Alexandre is just fun, because now I assume that if I'm actively trying to perceive, if I, Chantel, am actively trying to perceive something, that means Alexandre is probably focused on something completely different. And I have to look at the scene and go, okay, so what else is there?
What is the shiny thing that has Alexandre's attention? Is there a Lucas?
What is she more interested in?
There's definitely like character-wise, there's a degree of like, because obviously there's stuff that we've just discussed like as players where I'm like, man, once Chevalier like cottons onto this, there's going to be like, I don't even know. But even just some of the conversations where it's like Chevalier is just like, this is not at all what he had to deal with the last time with Elena. Like, but part of it is like, one, his time with Elena was when he was he had just only woken up. Like he wasn't fully aware of a bunch of stuff. So he's like, he potentially could have just missed it. He just didn't see it. And he's like, did I just not see it? I don't know. But he also was not in the same role in terms of
he was surrounded by people
just
who've
in
been
the dynamic
adventuring
of the relationship
together, who
but also
were
dynamic
already
within the group. Like,
yeah.
There was a different character basically being the Chevalier for Elena. It wasn't Chevalier. And so like she might have noticed this happening. And so, but he can't, also Chevalier now can't ask her and be like, did she know this? Did you? Because, particularly because the other AEST, who is one of, when I asked for Chantel for a full name from Alexandre, so at some point I could pull it out when if Chevalier needed to use the full name, and one of them was AEST. Like, you used this name I just made up for this person who was your grandmother's friend. It's like that person is much more observant than Chevalier ever was, and he's like, I now really wish I could talk to this person and I can't, because I don't know if this Elena was doing exactly the same thing, or if this is uniquely Alexandre. And okay, have to make a call on this.
The decision to put a full generation in between, so it is not daughter, it is granddaughter, has meant that there is a passage of time there, which makes everything undependable, because then you get into questions about how much is it generational, how much is it personality, how much is it relevant memory, how much of it is Chevalier's own not understanding, because literally it was he wakes up in the back of a horse cart bumping down a road with someone leaning over him going, oh, I think he's awake. I mean it worked, he's awake.
Oh, you're a Skyrim character.
You're a Skyrim character.
I always imagined it as a cave, but yeah.
No, literally, they didn't. Do you think? Okay,
I think I got.
Literally, the notes I have is they were actually actively on the way home before they risked turning you on, because they didn't know what you did. So we seem to be out in the middle of nowhere, and we're not going to blow anything of value up. Okay, try turning him on. No, that didn't work. Try turning him on. Okay, that didn't work either. Oh, he's awake now.
I don't think that's how I've been playing it.
Yeah, but
at all.
Yeah. But,
in that, also in that, like, it wasn't so much don't turn him on. It's like it as in the reaction is, why are you turning that on?
well,
not only why, how? And being the song goes, you need to pour a bunch of energy into that thing, and Elena going, okay.
Yeah. So there must be some similarity there.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
That's
definitely.
something Alexandria would do.
It's definitely
Sure.
definitely similarity. It's the extent
Yes.
Yes.
is the question. But the other interesting thing, it just for me, was I've been viewing leveling up not as gaining new skills, but reactivating systems that weren't previously working.
Yes.
Yeah.
And having, which, because essentially I viewed him as like, this is a level 20 character who suddenly found himself at level 1, and he's like, oh right, yeah, I should have been keeping these skills up, and I didn't, and now my systems aren't turning on. Oh, I made a bunch of promises based on it not being like this.
Oh no.
Sure, Elena, I'll follow your daughter around on a level 1
Obviously,
adventure. I'm
that.
level 20. I'll power level your granddaughter for you.
Yeah. Wait, why aren't my drones working? Why do I feel slow? I don't.
My very first ever D&D character, this is now 6-7 years ago. We did like the traditional roll dice or whatever to determine your stats, right? And I had dice on fire that day, and so like I didn't have a stat under 14. And if you've played D&D 5th edition, you know what that means. Like my character was basically a god.
Yeah.
And I said to the DM, I'm like, I never played before, but this sounds broken. Should I just start again? And he's like, no, those are the stats you rolled. You can play it. And I'm like, okay, for my benefit, because I'd like to sort of like get a wider variety of experience with this system. I'd watched a bunch of D&D at this point, but I hadn't. How do you feel about me playing a recovering alcoholic and starting with like a bunch of negatives? And so it was sort of my character rediscovering his old skills in the same way. And I think there's something really interesting in that, in like how leveling works, because it's very difficult, especially in D&D. I think they're like Open Legend, I think, would handle this a lot better, but many games do. It's very difficult to play an old character in D&D.
Yes.
Unless they just didn't have much of a life before.
There's implicitly, and the other thing too is particularly if you've been playing D&D as long as I have, the rules explicitly make it even worse to play an older character, because they sorted out age by child, teenager, young adult, middle-aged, and essentially what happened is that your physical, the older you got, your physical stats drop and your social stats go up. So you gain wisdom, you gain charisma, you lose strength, you lose constitution, and so the effect is you always get pigeonholed mechanically. Even up to version 3 of the rules, is older characters get pigeoned into the role of physically incapable, wizened mentors.
I'm trying to remember the name of the comic. I want to say, I think, Order of the Stick.
Yes, yes.
I love the bit where they meet this old guy and they're like, "Hello, do you?" And he's like, "Why are you yelling at me?" He's like, "Oh, sorry, I thought you were deaf." He's like, "No, I'm old. My wisdom went up, so my perception got better." Everyone knows your senses sharpen as you get older. And it's just like, oh yeah, hang on, you get better at seeing and hearing. Oh,
unsend me some of that.
On that same note of remembering skills, I do wonder how much of what's going on with the song and Alexandria is the song kind of going, oh no, I gave her too much. This is bad. Slow it down.
Oh, wait a second.
Oh no,
that's not Elena.
That's not Elena.
That faucet
Let's just start. We'll start here. Oh no.
I have a question for Chantal. I know we're probably going to wrap up soon, but I have a question for Chantal that was prompted by this discussion of Elena and stuff, and what you said about generational gaps, Michelle. Was there any cross-pollination between you? I'm trying to remember this because it was over a year ago now. You writing your backstory for Alexandria and the stuff with Elena, while Drew and I were coming up with the stuff about Lucas Edgewater Senior, because I didn't think so either.
We didn't have any
And
cross-pollination
yet
at
it's
all.
become and yet it's become like sort of this like meta theme of the campaign.
Yeah.
Is like this
Yeah.
generational gap is that we're both like seeking the glory of a generation gone by, you know.
I think there was definitely a moment when you were like explaining your character that and be like, yeah, it's because but we're inspired by our grandfather, and I was like, wait, seriously? Wait, that okay?
Yeah, huh?
That's
Wait,
kind of
you-
cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Hang on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that.
And a little bit of it too was that when I read the backstories, the Edgewater grandfather was famous, but there wasn't really a definition about why. And so I thought it would make a very interesting dichotomy if they were both explorers in their own way, just in two very different branches of the same why. Just sort of this espousement of the idea that there had been this golden era of adventure that had come and passed. Their children had.
I think the only thing we gave you,
I think there's
beyond him being famous and an explorer, was that he was like part of the first contact with the Aarakocra and like the opening up of trade routes.
So I'm the one who actually decided he was a great skyship captain, and he had basically pushed the technological frontiers of progress and all that stuff. And so absolutely the poster boy for the, in a way that Elena could never be. Lucas' grandfather was absolutely the poster boy for the Progress Confederacy. And so
which I'm sure he hated as well, because
that was why I had a lot of fun with the scene where you met the grandmother Dashamali, the matriarch Dashamali, where you sort of get that insight that no, he did it because he was told to do it, because that's what a good Progress Confederacy boy does, but he also spent an awful lot of time on his airship out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Right.
I believe the term is stooping.
I do. That was a fun moment where it's like, you get an insight. Now, here's two options. If one of them isn't a surprise, you get the other.
Yeah.
They were in a relationship, and it was like, we
all got it.
We got that.
You're putting down. That was fine.
Yeah, no, I'm just going to say, it just, because I didn't know, some players can be remarkably thick-headed about their own personal mythology. In other words, they've already preconceived what the answer is, and so it doesn't matter how many hints you drop, because it doesn't fit the puzzle they've already completed. They just keep throwing it over their shoulder. And so every once in a while I have to say, "Did you hear me?"
I quite also like that because there's the generational jump.
Mm-hmm.
It's like these two families had these very capable grandparents who then had very capable children, but not in any way the same regard. Like neither Maria or Cedric could do what their parents had done. No, just like they're not built to do that. They've excelled within the Confederacy. They basically they're much better at towing the line. They know how to work the system. Yes. And then the grandchildren have been like, yeah, but no.
Yeah, but
no.
But what if though?
Yeah, to me, that was a conceptual decision I'd made, was to really dig in on that, with this idea that both of these remarkable pioneers had come back as adventurers in high society. And so because my personal experience was, like, my dad's a farmer. My mom is is part of the Acadian Diaspora. So her dad was both a farmer and a fisherman on some of the worst fishing grounds and some of the worst farming grounds that were available, and yet made it work anyway. And so both my mom and my dad, desperately for my sister and I, didn't want us going into agriculture. They didn't want us going into manual labor. They had this high ideal that they were going to do everything they could to prepare us for the new world, right?
Yeah.
And the new world was going to be one of technology, of computers, of et cetera, et cetera. So that was always our push. My father was always very actively, and even his dad had really encouraged him, like, if you don't have to be a farmer, for God's sakes, don't use your hands, use your head,
Don't do it.
Right? Yeah. Because this is just not... So to me, I just thought it would be an interesting... So they had this mutual idea that both Cedric and Elena had arrived at this. Yeah, we don't work in this world. We're going to ensure that we raise kids who do. But then not really understand... But because they don't understand the world itself, they don't understand the knock-on effects that produces.
It's been really fun for me, like, behind the scenes, not only like with this Chantel, like reverse engineering the rest of the Donadu family.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's a degree of it, and we're sort of like, we've both sort of had hands of it, because it's like, well, you got an idea about like what would the grandmother do in this situation, because you're the one knowing it there, but then you'd know, and it's just sort of like this extra like, okay, we know how Alexandre ended up, and we know how Chevalier ended up, and we've got a bunch of ideas about what Elena was like. There's multiple people in that progression. Like there's the grandfather, there's the mother, there's the father, there's grandparents on the other side. And it's like all of them have influence on who Alexandre is now. And there's points where it's been like, oh, you probably get that from your dad, or you get that from your mom. And you get that because like the whole point of Alexandra being like, she's very much like her grandmother, but she is not her grandmother at all. She's still Alexandre.
Yeah.
So there's other aspects have to come from other people, which means you can
from
build those
where?
people and get a sense of who they are.
And one of those people we decided really recently, so we should probably tell you, Michelle, is...
Sure, you may. Like I say,
I don't...
Why would I know what the story is? I'm just not telling it.
It's like, well, it's not going to come up. We'll get around to it. Don't worry about it.
We decided a couple of weeks ago that Alexandre's dad is Aerith's nephew.
Oh, that, yeah, okay.
Yeah, like, because they got back and Alexandre's mum is born and Aerith has a nephew and they meet and
hang out.
That's that. They hang out a lot because family gatherings, because adventurers, you know. The adventurers convention that happens biannually. And so they see each other. But it's been a lot of situations where we've just kind of gone, okay, so working backwards, what does this mean? And how does this happen? And now Alexandre's getting in on that and kind of going, okay, but like, why did the song go with me and not my mother?
Mm-hmm.
What caused
that?
That
was
and
the
how did she feel
like,
about
why not this other lady? What is it about her?
There is actually
why skip a generation?
She has to be very different. So
there is actually a plot reason for that.
Yeah.
And that's where we're going to leave it for this week.
Yep.
No.
Well,
don't you leave me on another cliffhanger.
I was just going to say, well, we've been at it for
even the Q&A
hours.
get a cliffhanger.
Yeah, we've been at it for 2.5 hours without a break, so I think it's probably a good time to wrap it up.
It is like one of those things that it is like there's a not insignificant number of conversations that Chantel and I have had where it's been like, it could be this, and this, and it's like, but a lot of that hinges on the song and we know very little.
Yes.
So everything we've just said is pure speculation. And we're like, yep, okay. Good. Good.
Oh yeah, I love it.
Oh yeah.
Love it. It's so good.
Alrighty, folks. I think we'll call it there. Thank you very much, the three of you, for dropping in on the off day, as it were. Hey, yeah, extraterrestrial, you're dead on time for us to close up.
Oh no!
I'm so sorry. We're just winding down. We were doing an AMA this morning. Drew isn't with us today. Real life has snatched him away. So we've been hanging out, chatting all things about gaming and all things about the campaign itself. So it's been a lot of fun. But yeah, we just realized we've been basically yammering our faces off for 2.5 hours straight without a break. So we were going to wrap up. Do encourage you when you get a minute, though, to feel free to drop back and take a look at the VOD as well as anybody else. We do appreciate your support. Lost Worlds Archive, Lost Worlds Stories, Lost Worlds Everything, Lost Worlds Asterix. We thank you. We appreciate it. Please follow, subscribe, send stuffed penguins, whatever. Not real stuffed penguins like the gunned ones. We don't want a penguin that has been stuffed. That would just be icky. So wow, you guys are all really puzzled now. That's fantastic.
I just want a stuffed toy. Yeah, just give me a stuffed toy penguin. I don't understand why we have to.
Penguin plushies. That's
just a penguin plushie. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any of that.
Oh, by the way, the Aussies, remind me to tell you the platypus story sometime. You will find it hysterical. My mother and I had a very long story involving a platypus one day, and it was just hysterically funny. So, and as a Canadian, this takes some work, I'll point out. Eric. Oh, okay. Hey, Eric. Have a great night. And yeah, thank you very much, Eric. Sorry, I didn't recognize the handle, aka extraterrestrial. That's Eric. Got it. Thank you. Awesome. So yeah, so we're just wrapping up for today.
Just once you know.
Pardon?
It's like once you know, you're like, oh yeah,
Awkward.
that makes sense.
New people, new friends, old friends, all friends. We're happy to have all friends. So yes. But yeah, so for those of you catching us on the VOD later on, thank you very much for your support. And yeah, if you can follow us, subscribe, it's a huge help to us. We're just trying to get our legs under us. And if you like what we're doing, please bring friends to watch, send them links, press the clip button, giggle hysterically, all that other good stuff. Follow us on Twitter. We deeply appreciate your support. So yeah, we'll do the usual goodbye routine and we'll call it a day. Sammy.
Hi, I'm Sammy P. I'm on Twitter at _real Sammy P, just in case you find a fake one. And not because I was yelled at until I made a Twitter some number of years ago.
You can change it whenever you want.
But
is that me? Was it me that yelled at you to make a Twitter?
It was like the first voice acting thing I did was an audio book that was made a podcast. But then we also did at the end of each episode we did a discussion about the chapter to spin up. And at one point the author, who was also a friend of mine, but she was just like, "Damn it, you don't have a Twitter, so when I want to quote you in the tweet, I can't do that. Make a Twitter." And I went, "Oh, I'm sorry."
Yeah, I'm not sure if Michelle knows this, but 3 years ago, before Shadow of the Demon Lord, which is how you found the three of us.
The cool people doing the cool stuff.
Yeah, the cool people doing the cool stuff. We tried to put together a D&D podcast together, the three of us, with a couple of other friends. Huh?
3 years?
3 years ago. 3.5.
I'm old now.
Yeah, I know.
Oi!
I think I just stopped liking you, Chantel. I think.
Well, I mean, in my defense, it was my birthday yesterday, so.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna say, yes, but my point is that the numbers I'm working are 7 times 3. Okay, so.
I remember I went back to uni for a little bit and had a conversation with a lady who was freaking out about turning 25 while I was in my late 20s,
Oh my God.
and she didn't know. She didn't realize.
Yeah.
And I just had this whole conversation. It was like, you realize I was 27, 28 or something like that, and she just sort of looked horrified.
I went on a date recently where the girl it did exactly that. Was having an existential crisis about turning 25, and I'm like, I turned 30 this year. That's nice. Do you want to stop now?
You are not setting a mood, lady.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, that was
Liam
bad day for so many reasons. But...
Liam constantly likes to remind me that no matter how old he gets, I will always be older because there's a 9-month gap between us. 9 months.
That's Chrissy and I's joke. We're both born in 1969, but she's born in May. I'm born in October, so I'm technically dating an older woman. Yeah.
Yeah, it's that, right?
Yeah. So, yeah.
Where were we, Sammy P?
I think.
The point of the story was I remember asking you all to make Twitters, and barely any of you had Twitter at that point.
Mm-hmm. David, I'm almost positive David wouldn't have had a Twitter at that point.
David didn't.
Speaking of characters I miss, I was playing an NPC who for some reason found himself as an adventurer, and I say for some reason, I knew what the reason was. Jamie knew that reason was, and it wasn't pleasant.
Yeah.
Because he was definitely taking warlock levels at some point.
Just yes, the we shall never speak of this again until it becomes plot appropriate.
His dad was the driving force for the group, and his dad was. I was just which I was not aware of when we started. And I was like, I know who my dad is.
Yeah,
because I've had conversations about that, and this will not end well.
Yeah, so we were playing a low magic world, no magic, and the very first signs of magic returning were one of our other friends' characters being a wizard, and then
one was a cleric who's basically Joan of Arc.
Yeah, we had this Joan of Arc character, and then this character who'd been researching magic all his life, trying to make it real. And it finally started working one day, and no one knew why. And
when the crackpot at the edge of the village suddenly cast fireball. Yeah.
And then Sam's character was literally an NPC, an NPC version of Alexandri. just the
Yeah.
kid of a noble kid of a noble family.
Like,
but of course, he was actually
adopted into a noble family.
Yeah, he'd been adopted in.
I was like,
because
if things had gone correctly, he should be the guy you go talk to about buying herbs in like a town.
Yeah,
it's like when you're.
I don't mind giving away the spoiler because that show's never gonna exist. But the nobleman who adopted him was in fact a grand demon who had been biding his time for centuries, and now magic was returning.
Wanted like, was like, if I'm patient and I can exist without magic for however long, I get a head start.
Yeah.
When it comes,
I'll be the first one here in this world.
He like basically in my character's position, like his town had been slaughtered by something, and this guy had saved him. But no, the town had been slaughtered by this guy, who then like groomed him for the rest from like the age of 5 to be like, you owe me, and you will do whatever I say. And the boot was eventually going to drop me like, yeah, you need to collect souls.
Yeah.
This is what you need to do for me.
Yeah, you didn't know this bit yet, John.
Oh no! I absolutely knew.
Oh, did you?
But,
talked about this.
Yeah, I absolutely knew. But my point right now is we're really good at wrapping up.
Yes.
Oh, it's terrible.
Just by the way, we're now at that's a 9.5 minute wrap up. So
no, that's not having of me. This is just
you started with Sam.
I said what my Twitter is, and then we tangented it off, just beautifully.
Oh boy!
So
I still exist on Twitter. I do voice acting occasionally and performance and stuff, and then this. So check out all of those things. I guess.
Thank you, Sam. Jamie.
Oh God, someone else.
In the 32 seconds remaining,
3 hours later.
Well, let's do it quick. I'm Jamie Collette. You can find me on Twitter at Muffin Manifesto or on my website, jamie-collette.com. I also urge you to check out streamedshakespeare.com, where I have directed recently Richard III. You can see the VOD for a measly $5 Australian or $2 something American. And it stars our very own Drew Wilson, who's not here tonight, but you should check it out.
All right. And Chantal?
I am Chantal B. You can find me at Chantal B on Twitter. You can find me all over the place. On the 1st of December, because it is a fortnightly game. 30th of man, I hate time zones.
Awkward date.
The day somewhere in the world.
On the 30th of November, you can find me playing Castle Falkenstein, which is a fully cosplayed stream over on action_fiction at 8 p.m. Eastern. It is so pretty. Everyone's so pretty. You can also everyone's so pretty. Also, you can find me at any_actors channel occasionally for some good society, where the aim is to get kisses. And you can find me at Omens Rising, which is a Twitter handle that currently looks really bare because it's a TTRPG system and game that's being developed by a lot of people, but also me.
Awesome.
So I'm currently in writing process.
Very
cool. There's some stuff coming out. It's great.
She just says yes, exactly. The objective is
and
always
back
to get
to you,
kisses.
Michelle.
The objective is
always kisses.
The trick with that comments like that is trying to work out time it with the delay.
Yeah, a little bit of chat lag, but there we go. And of course, as always, I'm Michel Vaillancourt, longtime gamer and storyteller. You can catch up with me, Michelle V69, on Twitter, as well as michelleRvaillancourt.com. Okay, wow, that is a weird piece of work on my part. I actually said my name in English and then the English part in French. Okay, whatever.
Yeah, that was... I understood, but I was confused.
Anyway, So yeah, that's my website blog where I talk about a lot of different things, from homesteading to authoring to politics to all kinds of other stuff. So yeah, catch up. Thank you very much for joining us on this off day. We will be back next Saturday morning, early shift Eastern time, for more of the Unlawful Disorder crew. Drew will be with us, so it'll be regular gaming as expected. I think we're gonna keep experimenting with this talk show podcast format for the days where we don't have a full crew, as just a fun way to keep generating fresh and interesting content and reflecting on the campaign and having a good giggle together. So this has been a lot of fun. Thank you very much for joining us. If you're catching up with us on the VOD later.